We have got a special Saturday version of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. I've got one of the better players and podcasters with me, Toby, also known as BatFlipCrazy to all his fans. We're going to be live streaming the $5,000 Mike the Mouth Ultimate Draft. So it should be fun. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Happy Saturday afternoon, everybody. Feels weird to be saying that instead of Sunday night, but welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. I am Scott Jenstad. We are sponsored by Fantrax. We appreciate them for the sponsorship of the podcast all year long. I am joined today by Toby. I know him as BatFlipCrazy. Last year, he and I broke down the huge Mike the Mouth $5,000, kind of the first real big high stakes draft of the NFBC season. A couple of main events have started, but this is the first standalone 5,000 entry draft, $40,000 to first place. I think it's 20 to second and $7,500 to third place. Really huge contest. But first of all, Toby, good to see you again. We did this last year, got some good reviews, so I figured we'd run it back. How are you?
For sure, Scott. I'm doing well. Very good to see you. Good to be back. It's always nice to go in with super high expectations so you can disappoint everyone, you know?
Right? Yeah. I thought that too. I'm like, oh, so everybody liked it last year. I'm like, oh, we're pretty much destined to be failures this year. So, but how's your off season going? Are you drafting a bunch? Are you kind of waiting till late in the season? What's kind of in your draft profile so far?
Yeah, I started a little bit earlier this year. I started right around Christmas time. And so I started doing DCs, and I completed my DCs, back in early January, I think. All right. So I've actually been in a little bit of a lull for drafting. I did my OC for the Champions League qualifier, but it's been a little bit since I drafted, so I'm excited to get back this weekend in Vegas and do some drafting again. How about you?
You drafted main event in Vegas, or what are you doing while you're out there? I know I buried the lead here. You're in the Champions League qualifier auction. You made the final 15 table. As everybody knows who listens to the podcast, I choked the last 2 weeks, which I tend to do these days. I'm pretty good at I'm pretty solid at finishing poorly in the last 2 weeks, but I was kind of hanging on. My DC team was falling apart as it was, so it was more of a just kind of sputtered to the finish line than choking this time. But you are in that league. Auction is next Friday when we're in Vegas. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really looking forward to that. That's Friday evening, and then I've got another high stakes auction on Saturday night, and then I've got my main actually on Sunday morning. Okay. So I'll be doing that one while I'm there. I'm actually doing it online. I was initially in one that was scheduled to be live, but decided that it was going to conflict with the first fab period, and I have a couple leagues where I can use fab for that first period on Sunday night, so I moved it over.
Nice. We are going to we're gonna share the screen of the draft as it gets going. The guys are in New York. They're live, so I'm sure they're just they're chatting it up a little bit. But as soon as that goes live, we'll share the screen and get that going. But it's supposed to start at 3:00 Pacific, but I see that they're paused right now. Greg Ambrose is actually out there with them, so it's probably a big party out there. They're actually doing believe it or not, Toby, they do a live 5 minutes before the draft. They pick the draft spot. So there's no I have the 3 spot. Let me map this out for a week or two. When you're putting $5,000, they actually they pull out the balls. If your name comes up first, you decide what spot you want on the spot right there. If you come in last, you're picking the last. You may not pick last, but it's your last choice. So it's interesting. There's you got to prep for all the draft spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really hard right now too. I feel like there's a lot of movement in the first few rounds with pitchers moving up and hitters falling back. It's really hard to judge in KDS where you want to be because there's so much movement. And so that makes it particularly challenging, to get it, to have so much movement happening at the same time that you have 5 minutes to prep in terms of how you're going to handle it. So it adds an additional element that I think is really interesting and exciting for this draft in particular.
It does. It looks like we have Mike Mager and Scott Fleming, who are both in the draft. 2 phenomenal players ready to go here. I'm going to see if we can get them in and get them excited about their draft a little before we start. We can get some flavor some of these 2 guys before they do start this huge draft. Let me see if we can add them here. Are you guys there?
Yes.
Who do we got here? Let me know who we got and who you are and what's going on. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, it's Mike Mager and Scott Fleming.
Oh my gosh, we got 2 legends right there. Welcome. How you guys doing?
Thanks for the compliment. How you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, you won this league like 15, 16 years in a row before last year. Who won last year?
The guy sitting right here to my left, Mike. He did it in grand fashion. He kicked
I knew the answer to that. That's why I set you up for that. But Mike, did you was it a late win? Did you kind of roll in September? How was the season last year?
I actually think I took the lead in week 1 and kind of held on, but I was gasping for air at the end.
I put his name on the trophy at the All-Star break.
Were there any leagues that you didn't go wire to wire, Mike?
Yeah, plenty.
That's beautiful. Have you guys got your draft spots yet? Are we still waiting on that? What's it looking like?
No, we just finished that. I'm paying the winner's tax. I got pick 15.
And that
what was that? Was that your 15th choice, or where'd you come in at KDS?
Yes, last ball drawn.
Where
were you?
I'm picking in pick 7. There was a few people drawn out of the box before me, but they moved back, so I ended up at 7.
All right, nice. Mike, what's your thoughts on picking at the turn 15, 16? You mentioned the winner's tax, so it doesn't sound like that's the spot you wanted.
No, not at all. It just means I'm going to have to jump some guys to get the build I want, but I'll do it. You can win from anywhere, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because I when you look at drafts, there feels like there's kind of a drop off after like 17 or 18, maybe a little bit in ADP. So at least you get 2 of those guys. It might be the one advantage from drafting from the back this year.
Yeah, I think so. For rounds 1 and 2, it's really not bad at all. It's just kind of managing the rest of it.
For sure. Scott, what are your thoughts at pick 7? How are you going to kind of manage being in the middle there? You just make sure you can monitor the runs. You're kind of in a good spot where you don't have to worry about, waiting 20, 25 picks between picks.
Yeah, I've learned that in these standalone leagues, I'm best to just try to stay balanced and see what breaks, because there's a lot of different strategies people will come out with. You got people punting different things. So if you're kind of fluid, you have a chance to maybe take advantage of that stuff later.
Beautiful. Toby, you got any questions for these guys?
No, I mean, I was beaten by Mike a number of times last year, so I know how successful he was last year. So always appreciate him having being on here. And then Scott, I really like your point just about keeping your draft options open, as you move forward, especially in a standalone league. So yeah, I'm curious, like Mike, Scott mentioned how he might approach a little bit differently in a standalone league. Is there anything that you might approach a little bit differently as a result?
Is that to me or Scott? Sorry.
To Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. I generally don't like to punt anything, so I'm probably going to play it straight, see how that works.
Scott, how about you? You punting anything in a standalone? I know you don't want to give away your strategy live on the air here, but do you genuinely try and go for balance, even though you're not competing for an overall? In overall, you've got to make sure you have some sort of balance. But in a standalone, how are you kind of treating walking in here today?
Yeah, I'll stay balanced. We just did a main event before this, and you're kind of forced to cover all 10 categories there. So if I swerve a little bit into something a little heavy, you don't have to be at the top of the standings in each of these categories. You just don't want to be 0.
You guys did a main event before you did this draft?
Yeah, we just finished one.
Holy moly, you guys are animals. Where'd you guys draft in that one?
I was pick 4.
And I was pick 12, but mine was in the morning. Scott just finished his, but I did the early one.
You guys are not messing around out there. Real quick, Scott, from the 4, what were your first 3 or 4 picks there?
Ellie De La Cruz, Merrill, and who did I take third? Sale.
All right, nice. So you got plenty of speed. You got some power. You got your ace. That's a good start right there in 3 rounds. Mike, how about yours? What was your main event look like this morning? The first couple rounds.
I started Skeens, Betts, Edwin Diaz, and Reagans.
Wow. So 3 out of 4 pitching heavy.
Yeah, it just kind of worked out that way, and I hopefully caught up later.
Was that your plan, or was that just kind of the way it fell as the draft went along?
No, it wasn't my plan. I was happy to get have a chance to take Skeens at 12, and did so. And I wanted to go 1 pitcher, 1 hitter at 3-4, but I got sniped coming back on in the 4th round, and so I took Reagans.
Was Skeens the first pitcher, or was Skubal already gone?
Skeens was the first.
Oh, so your Skeens over Skubal then?
No, I auctioned Skubal over Skeens yesterday.
So you're diversification over non-diversification then?
Yeah, and for that one, I really think they're really close. And if I'm going to have multiple shares, I'd rather split them up.
Scott, how about you? You Skeens or Scooble if you got to pick between the two?
Well, we may find out in about 10 minutes.
that was an intentional question with you in pick 7, and you did not fall for it at all. I don't appreciate that.
I'm curious, like just with diversification, obviously this is a $5,000 standalone draft. Like, how does diversification factor into your considerations, or is it not part of your thought process, like because of the level of buy-in?
Yeah, no, well, at least for me, now that we're stepping up in the entry fee, I'm not going to worry about my shares for this one. I'm just going to take my best.
Same. I'll take the best team.
Beautiful. Well, we appreciate both you guys jumping on. We're going to go ahead and let you guys go draft. Are you guys starting up pretty quick here?
Yeah, Mike's here if you want to talk to him, but otherwise I think we're getting rolled soon.
Yeah, let's jump Mike on for a few seconds, then I want to let you guys get going.
Hey, thanks, guys. Looking forward to seeing you both in Vegas next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you guys as well. Toby, you Scooble or Skeens?
I would probably lean Scooble, straight up, but I have both. I have both of them on different teams, so they grade out really well for me. Like when I look at values, they're huge values standing in the first round. So I think a lot of it is a decision about whether you want to start with pitching, because I know that the hitters oftentimes in the second round and third round are not ones that I actually like as much as the pitcher. So
yeah, I got a question for you about that as we get into round 3 and 4 as the live stream goes on, but I'll save that for then. Mike, are you on?
I'm on.
Mike, how are you?
What's up, boys? Welcome back.
Good.
Thanks again for doing it. We're in a loud hotel at the Godfather games. It's perfect. It's Jersey. Everybody's loud here. So it's been amazing, and it couldn't be a more successful weekend. And now we cap it off with the premier draft in the NFBC. I just did a main event right before this. I had the 15 pick, and I took that main event down, so I'm winning that event for sure. And now you got the 13. I got the 13th pick. So I'm sure you're gonna, in the next one, at the back. So it's all going to be good.
What kind of luck is that? You host the games, you set it up, and then you get the 13th and the 15th pick.
Well, I can only rig it so much in Jersey, man. I get a bad rap as it is in Jersey, so I got to be careful what I do here. What
did you do at the 1-2 turn in your main event at 15?
It was a thing of beauty how it felt for me. I ended up starting with Scooble and Churio, so I'll take that all day long.
Wow, Scooble 15 is nice.
And then I double tapped the closer at the end because they fell. I took Edwin Diaz and Devin Williams at 3-4. So it was nice to sit back and relax and enjoy my saves the whole rest of the draft, just pound hitting and starters from there, which is amazing. It was an amazing thing. It worked out really well.
Was 3 pitchers in the first 4 rounds part of your plan, or just kind of the way it felt?
No, when you're 15, when that league, because there's no small soft leagues here. I just said, look, let me hope it falls to me. I was happy that I at least got that 5 category here in Churio falling, and then I said, okay, the closers are there. I'm not going to push it. So let me get the closers, and then I went from there and built it out from there. I really love the team. Worked out really well. So I like the back of the draft. A lot of opportunities for falling in a room like this. So I'm just excited about, trying to take this down. It's been several years. Last time I won this thing, I think it was 20. I forget what year it was. Early 2020s. And then Scott won his 3-year run, and then Mike took it down last year. So, but it's a really amazing year. I mean, we've had Hall of Famers in this league, and it's these are, like you said, it's like 1927 Yankees. It's on Twitter. It's a crazy league.
That was me that said 1927 Yankees.
I know you did. And that's why I made the comparison to the worst 27 Yankee by comparing myself to the one in the lineup there.
That was good. Are there any more drafts this weekend at the Godfather Games?
This is the one capping it off. They did. All right. They did 2 auctions on Friday, and they did 2 mains, and now the auction. I mean, the ultimate tonight. We did this all out of one room. Believe it or not, we were able to do this at the hotel. Only has 1 meeting room. Turned it over. Everybody's been great. Next year, I think it's going to be even bigger, but it's been awesome.
That is fantastic. That is cool. You do that. Cool. You put together. I love that there's live events going on the East Coast as well as in Vegas next week. And more than anything, I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, man. The party's going to be great. It's going to be great to see you guys out in Vegas. Nothing like it. It's an awesome scene, social scene. Getting to see everybody that has the same kind of passion that we do for this sport, this hobby we have. It's crazy. We love baseball. It's nothing better than fantasy baseball. I mean, there's so many of all fantasy sports. It's the best. And it's just a great time out there. So I'm looking forward to. I'll actually get a chance to relax because I have no chance to relax at all this whole weekend doing this stuff, organizing it, and then we have a big party. When this thing wraps up, we're going to the NTM Estates, and we're going to be there having a party with 30, 40 people there. So we're going to have a big fair there. So it's
not many people get invited to MTM Estates. That's a
yeah,
tough
I know.
ticket.
Well, you guys could come too if you ever make it out and do this live one year. We'll have you come over. It'll be a great night, and we'll have you. But please, like I said, I think you have all the team names. I think you have everybody, and you can share with everybody as you go. And it's going to be a great day.
Yeah, we have we'll have the names on the stickers. I don't think they're on the actual board. We couldn't.
No, they don't.
That
They
going,
don't
but,
have them. Yeah.
We'll get that. We'll get that going. Make sure we get to have somebody send me the list of the draft order, and we'll make sure that we we can make sure to critique all your picks at pick 13.
Yeah, and just blast how bad they are. Yes, I know.
Yeah,
that's
the plan.
I think I just blew it all in the first draft. So I hope anything close to that I'll take. But but I'm gonna jump. We have to start this thing. But
you guys get that started. We'll get the screen shared here. We'll be breaking it down. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for having us do this.
Can't thank you guys enough for doing it again, boys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
it. Take care,
Mike.
Right.
Yep.
Beautiful. So there we go. We got 3 of the guys that are about to start drafting here. They are getting going here. I will share that board as soon as they start going. But Toby, you asked these guys kind of the standalone versus overall contest league question. How do you fall on that? I know you do. You mentioned you're doing a high stakes auction when you're in Vegas. It's a stand. Is that a standalone or is that part of an overall as well too?
It's part of the overall, but it's the overall and the league prize are like fairly similar.
Right.
It's a 2.5K auction, so you get 20,000 for a first place victory, and then the overall I think is around 38,000, something like that. So you definitely have it in the back of your mind, but your real focus is winning that league because the prize is sufficient.
Right.
enough.
Whereas the main event, the league is still really good, but you're talking that overall prize is freaking gigantic. Where you're in that a 25 entry, that's obviously a big entry. The league prize is really good. Do you find yourself going for balance? Or are you one that will punt steals or saves or something like that? Or you kind of just see how it goes during the auction?
Yeah, I like to stay balanced. I think what Scott mentioned about being able to be flexible as the draft develops, that's something that I've really tried to focus on recently, is really being able to take advantage of some of that value that falls later on, or for whatever reason, if there's a run on something, you have the flexibility to be able to pivot and adjust to that. And then I also think, like, during the season, if you have a balanced approach, you're able to better adapt, and if there are injuries or underperformance, you're not relying on 1 or 2 players to really take you forward in a category. So I like to keep it balanced for that reason.
And the great thing with an auction is if you realize you're have a deficit somewhere, you can fix that pretty quick. Like if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm down in steals, you buy the next steals guy. We're in a draft, you're like, got to hold your breath for 15, 16 picks. Make sure that nobody takes that stolen base guy you really like. So there's a lot of different strategies. I love snake drafts, but auctions are really a lot of fun for that reason too. You can really kind of fix your mistakes a little bit quicker because you can attack something you really need.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also have to be careful, because if you are in a situation where you have 1 or 2 players left that are going to meet the needs of your team, then the likelihood that somebody has recognized that is going to push you up on that guy is a lot greater. So another benefit to being balanced throughout the draft is not having 1 or 2 guys that can really take you forward.
When I'm in an auction, either football or baseball, I pretty much never want to need the last guy in a tier is kind of what I bring it down to. Like, especially like in football, there's 6 receivers left. You get 5 of them go, and you're like, I need to get this one guy. I won't overbid in the first 5. That last guy always goes with $6, $8 more than you want to. You always, I always want to get like the 3rd to last guy in a tier, maybe the 4th, somewhere in the middle. But get that last outfielder, that last closer. There's always, especially in a 15-team auction, there's always someone else that needs that guy too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The beauty is when you already have a player and the tier is ending, and you can toss that guy out there and watch people fight over him and watch that price escalate. So it works both ways. For sure. So we do have the draft going here. First couple picks are up. We got Bobby Witt going first, then Shohei Ohtani, then Ellie De La Cruz. No real big surprises as of yet, but you don't expect to have too many big surprises in the first round. Toby, I want to ask you, first round this year, we've only got a couple of pitchers in the first round. We have like 13 hitters. I'm using kind of I'm using the main event for the ADP at this point. We've got 5 of them, so I'm just kind of using that just so everybody knows as we go along here. I'm using the 5 main events we've had so far. Might be a few more now that there was one this afternoon, but we're up to 6 now. So I'm going to 6 main events now. But is there anybody in the first round or a couple guys in the first round you don't want this year? Everybody loves the first round. People talk about the first round too much, I think. Usually it's all studs. But is there anybody you're like, I'm just not taking this guy in the first round this year? Yeah, there's nobody that I'm vehemently against. I would say Ellie De La Cruz. I see that he went to Team 3, so he went pretty early. For me, there's kind of a top 4, which is Witt, Ohtani, Judge, and J-Ram. And so for me, Ellie, I'm really trying to focus on batting average. I think there's speed available late, and I think it's been well kind of discussed throughout the offseason about Ellie and his stolen base opportunity percentage, and I really see that probably those stolen bases trickling down. And so when you look at the average risk, when you look at the stolen bases likely not being where they were last year, that's the one guy where, again, if I can get him in the middle of the round, a little bit later, I'm fine. But right now, I'm not targeting him.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on there as well. I don't really want to have that 4 pick in there because I just know I'd take Jose Ramirez instead. And you get to 5, it gets a little tough. I don't want to be in a draft where Judge goes 3rd, Ramirez goes 4th, and I have 5th, and I got to try and figure out what I want to do. So I don't really love that spot. Just to give people a list here, I know the names are on the board, but just to give you a quick list of who's in this draft. Spot 1 is Simon Hamp. Spot 2 is John Limberis. Sign 3 is Mark Perlmutter. 4 is Sam Horton. 5 is Jason Santu, who had a monster year last year. He was everywhere across the leaderboards. Dominic Rello is 6. Scott Fleming, who has won this league 3 times last 4 years, is picking 7. Eric Albright, who we see in Vegas, who's a hell of a player, beat me in a main event last year, is picking 8th. Dan Semsel, who's won the overall in the NFBC main event 2000, I forget what year, but he won the overall. He's picking 9. David Einhorn, 10. Michael D. Calvacante in 11. Jody Ryan, who I've played in leagues with forever, is in 12. Mike Masato, Mike the Mouth, who's hosting, is 13. Ned Donahue, 14. And last year's champion, Mike Mager, is 15. So just looking at the last year's champion, Toby, Mike Mager goes Vlad Guerrero, Francisco Lindor at the 1-2 turn. What are your thoughts on Mike's first 2 picks?
Well, I find it very difficult to be critical of Mike.
How does
last year, right? How do we? Yeah. But I really like that. I like where he went there. You get one guy who's just an absolute batting average stud. Maybe he doesn't have the steals, but he does contribute a little bit at first base. In Vlad Jr., he's heading into a free agency year, which whether it makes an impact or not, he's going to be giving everything that he has this year. And then Lindor, a really nice compliment there. I know that there's a lot of shortstops available, but I feel like I always seem to be short on shortstops for some reason. So I really like that pick too. So you're looking at, again, he's got some speed. Lindor has had a solid batting average the last couple years. He's contributing in 5 categories. So you have a 4 and a 5 category contributor right there. I love the start, and it'll be interesting to see who falls to him at 3-4 in terms of pitching and whether he goes that direction.
Couple of comments in the chat. Michael C. mentioned that Judge at 5 is a gift. I think that Toby, I probably would agree with that. We think we take Judge at 5 in a second. Someone in the chat asked about the series we got overseas starting next week. They're asking of the 4 starters in that series, who would you start at a 5x5 roto? Toby and I think both mostly just play NFBC, so we don't really have to answer that question as of yet. Those are considered, we call them cheat games in the NFBC. You get to see what happens in those games before you decide if you want to start those guys. Obviously, there's leagues drafting before and after that, so it'd be unfair if some people had seen those. It really affect drafts, who you start and all that kind of stuff, especially with an overall component. So we don't have to really answer that quite yet, but I'd start most of those guys. I mean, you're talking studs, especially on the Dodgers side, and then obviously Imanaga with the Cubs. Top 2 starters on teams. You're probably starting with those guys anyway. Obviously, we can see it if someone gets lit up like Yamamoto did last year. It's an easy sit for week 1, even if you got to miss that second start.
Yeah, absolutely. We do kind of have that going on in the NFBC. So I think also, early on in the year, I think oftentimes pitchers are a little bit ahead of hitters. I think when we look, some part of it is weather-wise, but I think when we look at ERA and other things, they go up over the course of the year. And so I personally like to be on the front end of starting a lot of starters that I might not start later in the year, early on in the year, just because I do think the pitchers have a little bit of a benefit there.
So we talked earlier about Skubal versus Skeens. In this draft, Skubal went 7, Paul Skeens went 8th. I want to ask you about that kind of this next tier of starters. We mentioned this, like usually 13 hitters in the first round. Garrett Crochet went in the second pick of the second round. Logan Gilbert in the 4th pick. Zach Wheeler the 6th pick. So we had 3 starters and 5 picks there. How do you feel about Crochet? You look at his FanGraphs page, StatCast page, and everything jumps off that page. But it's 1 year starting. He was a reliever. There's always some injury concerns with him. Moving to the Red Sox, do you have Crochet as your 3rd starter? Are you a little further down him? Where are you on Crochet? I find that he's a guy that is kind of tough. People are a little bit all over the map on him.
Yeah, I like Crochet a lot. I mean, there's not a lot to dislike, and I think if as long as you feel health-wise that you feel comfortable going with him, I see no reason not to go there. I don't think I would have him as high. I'm actually a little bit surprised about the order of the pitchers. I think Zach Wheeler is highly underrated. I mean, talk about a guy who has been consistently really, really good. He's on a really good Phillies team. He's going to win games. Yeah. He's been there too, so there's no like adjustments or things that he's changing. His velo was actually up a mile per hour so far in spring training. So, you know, I really like Wheeler. I think because maybe he doesn't have as much of a kind of he's not as trendy of a pick right now. Yeah. Maybe he's falling a little bit in drafts. I think we've seen that in some auctions as well. So he's really interesting to me. But any of those three guys that went there, I really like a lot.
We must be old if Zach Wheeler's the veteran old boring guy, because he was like the kind of frisky, sexy, injury prone guy, and now he's just kind of the rock solid old veteran in this group. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, for sure. And it is interesting. I mean, early on in his career, he had a ton of injury issues, but really hasn't had many injuries to speak of, knock on wood, over the last few years. So it's interesting how guys can kind of be injury prone until they aren't. So maybe Garrett Crochet in 3 or 4 years, we're like, remember when he used to be injured? So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you look at the last 6 years on Wheeler, 29 starts, 31, 11 during the COVID year, but that was a full season, 32, 26 was one down year, 32. I mean, it's about as good as it gets for pitchers in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what you're looking for. That volume, the ratios at that volume, the Ks are just really incredible. So like that pick a lot.
Little bit early here on Corbin Burnes. I want to ask you about him. I know that there's been a lot of chatter about him. His ADP in the main event so far is 32 through 6. I mean, he went in the 13th pick of the second round here to Team 3, who is I know I mentioned that earlier, but Team 3 is Mark Perlmutter, good player. Where are you on Burnes? I think that the strikeout drop from the last 2 years is what kind of is worrying people. He's a 35% strikeout guy in 2021 in Milwaukee. I mean, he was a huge strikeout guy, then down to 30.5%. And 25.5%. Last year was 23.1%. Where are you on Burnes? Are you worried about the strikeout drop? Are you still think he's kind of he throws a lot of innings, over 190 innings last 3 years. So that's really, solid volume guy. But where are you on the strikeouts and where are you on Burnes this year?
Yeah, I've never been a high person on Burnes. And so I think it's important to factor that in. As I share, okay. I have him ranked 55th among all players. And so he's pretty far down on my list for the K reasons that you mentioned. But again, there's something to be said for consistency. I think projection systems will look at, kind of the diminishing return on strikeouts, the whip, all of those things to hurt him a little bit on the projection. But I'm not a huge fan of his. But again, he's proven me wrong for a number of years in a row. So, I'll probably be wrong again.
But if you have him 55, obviously you're not getting him in drafts then.
No, I don't have him. I probably haven't had him for 3 or 4 years too.
Okay.
So.
We got a first big wow moment in this draft. Mason Miller, I almost said Oakland A's. Wow, Sacramento A's. Just Athletics. I don't know what the hell we're calling them. First closer off the board and pretty early. 3-8. So what is that? The 38th pick in the draft right there. First closer off the board, and he went to Team 8 there, who started with Paul Skeens, then Jackson Merrill, then Mason Miller. That's Eric Albright, who's a really good player. Know him very well. He's one to avoid if you can. A, what do you think about Miller? B, what do you think of him as the first pick? And C, I've seen it main events. This 4th and 5th round closer run is pretty wild. There's 10 guys that go between pick 45 and I'll call it pick 73. So very start of the 4th round, kind of near the end of the 5th round. There's 10 guys that go in that range. It's 28, 27 picks, and 10 of them are closers. Are you going to get one of those 10 guys in your draft? So you want to just kind of get your one locked in and move on? Who is it, and how do you feel about Miller going first?
Yeah, I don't mind Miller going first. Incredibly talented. Again, one of these guys who health is really the only question mark for him. Threw a decent amount of innings last year, struck out over 100 guys, I believe. Really nice. My projections like him too, have him 33rd overall. So even a value going higher in the draft. I think it's kind of a game theory question where it's like Miller is a really good pick, but is whoever you would have gotten here,
sure,
and not Miller, but an Iglesias, a Munoz, a Helsley, a better pick there. So I like Miller a lot. It's also a standalone league. And so I'm curious to see if closers fall a little bit.
Right.
Obviously, we're seeing Hader, we're seeing Diaz go now. So that might not be the case. They're actually going higher than in some of the main events. But that's kind of the factor for me. Strategically, I definitely want to get one of those top end closers, one of those guys who I know are going to get saves. I think how I approach it, the second one is really a matter of how the draft flows. Yep. Like if a closer I like comes along in the fourth round, I might grab 2 up top, as long as I feel solid about the ratios, or I may wait to some of those guys going in the 6th, 7th, or 8th round, or even the Kenley Jansens of the world later on in the draft.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Is kind of you got to just kind of see how it flows a little bit. I took a couple of closes in the first 5 rounds in my DC and just kind of the way that it flowed. And a lot of it's where you're drafting. Like if you're at the ends, you've got to like realize that if you're pick 15, you're like there's 28 picks before I go again. I bet if I'm going to get a closer, I got to do it now. If you're in the middle, you kind of play and see how the draft flow goes. If you're in the middle and no closes have gone yet, just wait another round. You hope that 7 don't go before you pick again. And usually they don't because most people don't pick 2, but every once in a while you get someone that does. Team 13, Mike Masato just did. He's taken Hader and Devin Williams. So kind of that thing of attacking it. And he probably doesn't have taken the closer the rest of the way here.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think that's one way to approach it. And I think the thing is, if you can feel like you can lock in some ratios with some of those guys going, in rounds 5 and 6, it'll be really interesting to see what pitchers get back to that point in the draft, to see whether it's going to be something that Mike regrets or not. We'll see. I'm very interested to see how some of the teams like Team 11, like Team 4 that don't have any pitchers approach this. Do they go closer here, or do they go starter and maybe they're either not punting saves necessarily, but going to take a shot at some of these later closers who have a few more question marks than the early ones?
Yeah, we have, I think it's 4 teams right now without a pitcher through 3 rounds. Team 11, 9, 6, and 4. Wow. So it's definitely a build. I want to ask you, that was a question I had for you. You're one that in the past, you talk about pocket aces. You liked it. You were the kind of one who made maybe taking 2 starters popular early on. I think you've backed off that a little bit. I think you drafted a few more hitters now than you used to. Do you feel like there's a dead zone at all in hitters? As I do drafts and doing stuff, I kind of feel like that end of 3rd to like middle 5th round is really not a lot of hitters I really like. And sometimes guys sneak into there, but like you see like in the 3rd round here, Lawrence Butler's already gone. Michael Harris is gone. Rafael Devers went early 4th. I just feel like there's a spot here. Teoscar's one guy I do like in this range, but I feel like kind of middle to the end of 3 to like middle of end of 5. There's a lot of pitchers I like and not a lot of hitters I like. And I'm starting to figure out if I want to make sure I get a couple hitters early so I can take those pitchers I want, not to force a hitter in that range.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. I think earlier in the draft season, it was actually the end of the 2nd round where I started to not be as interested. I'm not as interested in some of the guys that are going in the 2nd round. I'm not a huge fan of Duran this year or Merrill, which I know is a little controversial. So there is a pretty big dead zone for me there, which I think is the challenge as I approach drafts, because like you said previously, I used to focus on pitchers early on, but I do worry about the hitters that are going to be available if I'm picking towards the back end of the draft. I really don't love a lot of the hitters there, but I do think that there's more value now that pitchers are moving up. You have players like Michael Harris, who's going a lot later than before. You have Devers, who's also falling, who is a really interesting pick. I know you and Jeff talked about him on Sunday on your podcast, but he hasn't played at all this spring, but when you look at his consistency, we worry about his health, but he's been consistent health-wise. He's been right around 600 plate appearances, 30 bombs, high batting average, runs an RBI, obviously. And I think last year he even added a few steals. So there is some interest I have in guys who are going around this spot where maybe I feel a little bit more comfortable picking a pitcher in the 1st round.
Yeah, it's a good point. As we see main events, pitchers usually do get pushed up a little bit. So some of those, the old adage goes, if guys get pushed up, someone's got to fall. And those have been a few of those hitters. 2 questions I got for you since you brought him up. Rafael Devers, is there a spot where you're like, you know what, he's so consistent. I know he hasn't played yet, but it sounds like he's okay. Is there a spot in drafts where you're like, all right, it's time to take him? He's clearly slipping. He's someone that maybe was early 3rd round early on, now is early 4th round, has fallen a full round. And that's a big amount of spots when you're talking this early. You guys in the 13th, 14th round fall around all the time. Guys here don't usually have that happen. Where do you kind of feel Devers is a spot where you're like, okay, now it's time?
Yeah, I mean, I think around where he's going right now. I mean, I think in snake drafts, like you said, like we just talked about, like there's a little bit of a dead zone. So I think about like a Junior Caminero right next to Rafi Devers. You have a guy who I think you're hoping that Caminero can get to the numbers that Devers has been able to provide throughout his career. Although there's obviously upside, like we've seen, some real progress on Caminero's front, but again, he's never done it before, and so. Again, there's definitely risk, but we've already seen some of the concern was like, is Devers going to be happy because Bregman's at third base? Well, we've already seen Devers walk that back a little bit and say, hey, I'm happy to be at the DH. If he's not in the field at all, there's the adjustment to being a DH, but then there's also less of a concern around injury. So does that boost his value a little bit? So there's all these different factors, and you really, as a player, need to take that into consideration, take a look at the projections, whatever your both your gut and your mind are telling you, and then make a decision based on that.
So that's if I'm doing the math, I think 8 closers off the board by pick 62. So they are definitely flying off. But before we get to closers, I got to ask you real quick. You made a comment. You don't like Jackson Merrill and his draft price. What's your reservations on Merrill, who obviously had the huge rookie year last year, 24 bombs, 16 stolen bases, hit 292, drove in 90. Moving into it'll be a good lineup spot in San Diego. Obviously, suspended himself as an everyday guy there. He did that at 20 years old too. But I guess he turned 21 at the start of last year. But at 21 years old, what are your reservations on Jackson Merrill at the draft price?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing not to love. Like, though, I won one of my high stakes auction last year because of Jackson Merrill. Having him, drafting him there was a lot more fun. I just think, my major questions are around a little bit around the speed. Whether he's going to have that speed or not. Again, I'm having to do it for a second year. I think there's 2 different trains of thought. The first is, some of these guys who get in here young, like the growth and the development is just, they can take that leap to the next level. But then at the same time, I think there's an opportunity to maybe adjust to him a little bit. A lot went his way last year. So I think it's a little bit of that. And also I'm a projections guy. And so when I throw him into my projections, he is not, he's not jumping out. I have him 45th overall on my main event sheet there. And, while I am willing to override my projections in some instances, I typically, especially early on, I want to limit my amount of risk. And so I'm less likely to do that early on in drafts.
And when someone's 45 on your sheet and regularly goes 23, 20, 24, 25, you're just going to find someone you like more at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same with Duran. Again, I had Duran last year in quite a few leagues, and I loved him a lot. And he's not as far back. I have him at 27, right here, probably because the speed is a little bit more reliable. So again, I'm not picking him typically, but the sheet does like him a little bit more than Merrill in this instance.
Rupert Henley in the chat asked, when does Ronald Acuna Jr. go? It was a well-timed question because he went about 12 seconds after he asked the question. 6th pick in the 5th round to Team 6, who is Dominic Rello. Toby, where are you on Acuna right now? There is the the thought he's not going to run very much. He's going to miss time, but he's come out and said he's not going to run as much. He's done it twice now. He said it this week again. He said, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said at the point that, I can steal 30 and not have to deal with the base pass and sliding and all that kind of stuff, rather than stealing 70, keep myself in the lineup. Like, at some point, we got to believe the player here, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's also interesting, right? The expectations are so high. It's like, I'm not going to steal 70, but I'm going to get 30.
Right.
And I think as a player, right, if you're Dom, who drafted him at Team 6, and you're like, oh, well, you're still going to steal 30, and you're going to hit 20 bombs, and you're going to have a good batting average, and you're going to be hitting at the top end of a really, really good lineup. That feels like a decent shot to take right there, And so with Dom, the way that he's building his team, obviously pitching is going to be the major question. How is he going to address it?
Yeah.
But when you look at the team that he has a really solid core of hitting where he's got Carroll, he's got Harper, he's got Riley. So he's got guys that he really trusts. And so maybe he's saying, I'm going to take a shot here. My next 3, 4, 5 picks are going to be pitchers. This gives me both a very solid floor and a very high ceiling that I can work with. And so I don't mind it with the build that he has, so long as, again, he's going to address the pitching at some point in time.
How much do you worry about the early to late May or either mid-May comments? I mean, if you're taking Acuna, are you just kind of like I'm hoping for May 15th, I get 4.5 months? Is that kind of where you're hoping that comes in?
Yeah, totally. I think, one of the things that's beneficial about having projections is you have the ability to set the number of games that you think a player is going to play.
What's your game projection on Acuna?
Let's see. I'll tell you what's in my sheet here. Hopefully I'll be able to find it quickly because it is on a separate page here.
Extremely proprietary information here. I didn't even know if I wanted to ask you the question, but I did it anyway.
No, that's all right. Where is Acuna? I'll have to sort by position here. I know this is really thrilling podcasting here
You think with his name being AC, you just would have searched by alphabetical by last name.
Well, I am not that intelligent, Scott. That is one of the things. So I have him in my sheet at 518 plate appearances.
Okay.
Which again, not that high. He comes out as player 10 at 518 plate appearances.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And so the projection is 518 plate appearances, 24 homers, 36 steals, a 296 batting average, 90 runs, 69 RBI. I think the batting average there is really the key, right? For me, in my sheet, I'm actually I add additional emphasis on batting average just because I really want to be solid on that ratio in the hitting categories. Yep. So that's obviously boosting him in my sheet. I'm not going to take him at 10, honestly. Like I should probably change the plate appearance to be closer to where I might draft him. But again, if he plays and he's healthy when he comes back, I think that he will return value when you grab him right there.
So there's been 6 main event drafts so far. That's obviously the big NFBC draft, 1,800 entry. Min pick on Acuna has been 22. Max has been 63. So the pick today would have been, 66. So it would have been later than any of the main events. 22 feels early to me for missing a month and a half. Although you just said, your projection has him even higher than that. Where are you thinking that you would pull the trigger on Acuna?
I'm super risk adverse, Scott. So I probably am not pulling the trigger on him, honestly. There's just so many different things that can go wrong, right? Yep. Like we're assuming that he returns and he's fully healthy. We're assuming that he doesn't get, re-injured at a certain point. We're assuming again, like he has had years, I can't remember which year it was, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago where he came back and the power wasn't necessarily there. So again, I think there's a lot of different questions and a lot of different things that can go sideways. And early on, I'm trying to minimize my risk. And yes, he could be that home run pick that wins you leagues, but I'm much more likely to go the safe route and the safe alternative there.
Tanner Scott's range in the 6 mains is 78 to 105. He just went pick 72. If I'm doing this, 72, 34. Yeah, 70. Yeah, 72 in this draft here. The big, we're talking about the Mike the Mouth $5,000 ultimate draft here, $40,000 first place. Toby, you're wearing the Brooklyn Dodgers hat. I know you're not wearing the LA Dodgers hat, but where are you on the Dodgers bullpen? They have freaking studs there. They signed more relievers than anybody else signed. They got Blake Trinan. They got Kirby Yates. Signed Tanner Scott. Dave Roberts said, Tanner Scott's going to get the brunt of the early saves off was his quote. Obviously, the Dodgers tend to mix stuff up a little bit. How do you feel about Tanner Scott? Obviously, the Dodgers could win a ton of games. We're expecting them to win 110 games. It was something crazy like that. Even if they win 100 games, it's a lot of games to try and save. How are you kind of figuring out where to draft this Dodgers bullpen?
Yeah, I wish Dave Roberts would have come out and said that before I drafted Kirby Yates in my OC CLQ. That would have been much more preferable. This is a little high for me. Again, I'm trying to minimize risk, right? When I think about Scott, he's an incredible pitcher, but even if he's getting the brunt of saves, we don't have a definition of brunt that Dave Roberts was focusing on, right? Maybe his idea of brunt is 51%, right? And so if you're drafting him as your first closer and you're only going to get 20 saves, right? Is that something that you want? Probably with Scott's ratios, yes, that's going to be a fine pick where he's going right there, but it's a little bit more risk for me than I'm willing to take early on. But again, Team 12 did miss out on kind of the locked in closer run, if you will. So maybe it's a product of that.
Yeah, I think that you get to the point where you don't have one and they're all gone, you start to panic a little bit. But it's just tough because, I mean, you could see the ninth inning of the Dodgers bullpen in July, and it could be Michael Kopech. It could be Evan Phillips by that point. It could be Blake Trinan. It could be Kirby Yates, Tanner Scott. You know, if they got a bunch of lefties, they're facing some stud lefties in the eighth inning, it makes sense that the Tanner Scott goes there, or go pitch the eighth inning in a tough spot. And those other guys we mentioned are all righties. It's just I worry a little bit about. I know they have Alex Vesia. They got Banda in that pen too, so there are some lefties out there, but I don't know. It's a tough spot where I just worry that they might use him in the eighth inning against some tough lefties.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the risk, right? And you got to weigh that into your save projections. I'm not sure what Scott is projected for by most systems. I can look it up right now.
I got it up on my screen. It's like 25 saves for 21 for ATC, 21 for the bat, 25 for Steamer.
Yeah, that seems right. I might go towards the 21, as you mentioned. Like Alex Vesia is good, but he's not necessarily the elite guy.
Right.
You've got Trinan, you've got Yates. You've got a lot of different options and ways to mix and match. So Dave Roberts is a smart manager. The Dodgers have done this before, right? Like last year, there was a lot of mixing and matching, a lot of adding and dropping in fab, thinking that the Dodgers had selected their next closer. And I don't guess that that's going to change all that much.
It's a good point in the chat here by Richard Sands. That Dominic Rello team is also our friend Rob DiPietro. They are partnering up in that team too. I should have mentioned that before. I had the list from Greg Arboch. Just said Dominic Rello. I knew that Rob was in this league as well. I saw his little his MTM ultimate ball that Mike tweeted out. So that Rob is drafting with Dominic. So he's mentioned Dominic. That's Rob DiPietro also. So we're through 90 picks in this draft so far. Looking at this board, is there any teams that you're worried about? Any teams you love? Is there anybody that jumps out to you on this page at all?
Man, is there anybody that jumps out? It's hard to say. I mean, initially, like on team 3, obviously I was critical of the first couple picks. I apologize. And I'm not a big Wyatt Langford fan either. But I do like the last two. I think Ryan Walker is set there as the closer. He was really good last year, high K rate, decent walk rate. And I love Sal Perez going right there. I think Sal Perez going at that point in the draft is a huge value. So has compensated a little bit for that. I'm looking for a team where I'm like, I absolutely love what they're doing. And Logan Webb, I like that pick a lot. I do like pretty much all of the pitchers that Mike Mager has drafted, which is not necessarily a surprise. Starting off with Vlad and Francisco Lindor as your base. I think Dylan Cease, just the strikeouts alone, again, 200 strikeouts more and more. San Diego is a great place to pitch. He was really good last year, shows up really well in the projections. Edwin Diaz shows up as the top closer on my board. So getting him there after, as the third closer, I think there's been a little bit of concern around the velo for him at the beginning of the year. But, again, it's a lot of closers are now taking the approach where they're keeping the velo down during spring training. I think Ryan Helsley has talked about this in the past where they're not going full bore. They're just trying to get the feel for it. So going there, and then Pablo Lopez, who was a second round pick last year, again, the underlying metrics were as good, if not in some cases better than the previous year, and he didn't get the impact. And then Joe Ryan is another guy who shows up really well. So I like what Mager has done a lot there. So no complaints in that situation. With a lot of these teams, again, I have a specific perspective or build I'm looking for. Right. And there's a lot of I like and I don't like that I'm seeing in these. So anyone for you, any teams that are standing out for you?
The thing that jumped out to me right now is we've got 4 teams that have not taken a closer. So there's like 11 or 12 closers off the board, but teams 6, 7, 9, and 11 have not taken a closer as of yet. I'd be interested to see if we got some tankers there. I mean, team 7 is Scott Fleming. He has 4 starters, but no closers yet. So it'd be interesting to see if these teams are, maybe looking to get two of the third tier guys, or maybe punting it in a standalone. But the more teams that punt it, it makes it a little tough, right? Because you just suddenly if you get 10 or 12 or 15 saves, you get 3 or 4 points in there. So it becomes, as you get through a draft and you're punting, as you look other teams punting, you're really tempted to maybe grab one, because that's 4 or 5 points right there you can get that you wouldn't get normally if you were the only one punting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just becomes a game too, where it's like there's only so many closers left, and so when are they going to go, and how quickly are they going to go, and are you going to be left out of it? So it's going to be really it'll be really fascinating. There's so many different dynamics, in the draft, and just tracking each one of the teams. It's interesting. I love doing this live and having to think through, like, what are guys thinking about? What is the thought process? What's happening here?
For sure.
It's really fascinating.
A good question from our friend Anthony Gialdi in the chat, talking about the new speed rules with the bigger bags, the throwing over, all that kind of stuff. We saw stolen bases jump a couple years ago. Do you feel like with all those steals, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to get some early, because if I don't, I'm just gonna get buried? Are you more of like, well, there's so many guys now that steal later, I can grab them? I am one who struggles with stolen bases, so I'm interested to hear how you feel about that. I had that on a question list here too, but now it came up in the chat. We should talk about it. What's kind of your strategy with stolen bases? Are you like, really, I got to get a certain number in the first 3 rounds? You have like a kind of a handful of sneaky guys in the middle rounds. You're like, if I'm behind and steal, these guys let me grab. Where do you kind of go with steals?
Yeah, I definitely think it is waning a little bit. I mean, for me, it's really like I'm focused on batting average early on. Like that's really where I'm trying to boost it up. There are some batting average guys a little bit later in draft, but they're fewer and far between, I think, than the steals guys.
And they often do nothing else but do batting, but provide batting average too.
For sure, yeah. Your Luis Arias of the world, Steven Kwans of the world.
Yep.
I think that so I definitely think it is waning. I do think that it's important to at least have a knowledge of like the positions, right? Like there are certain positions where there are guys going later available who provide a little bit of speed. And so recognizing that, but again, it's a game of chicken always. It's like, okay, if there's a handful of those guys, like when are you going to take them? What are you going to miss out on because you're prioritizing speed a little bit later? I think one thing that people have become a little bit more comfortable with too is each year, like Xavier Edwards last year, or John Birdie the year before, there's these guys who are not drafted, who are coming up either from the minors or are getting opportunities, who can really contribute a lot of speed very quickly. So I think it may just be a matter of, okay, well, maybe if I'm an 80th percentile drafter, maybe I'm less focused on getting to the 80th percentile in speed. Maybe I just want to be at the 70th percentile, recognizing that I know going into the league that I need to have my eye open for these speed guys that can make a real difference as the year progresses.
Are you one who will draft, Tampa Bay Ray prospect Chandler Simpson? He's going to get drafted. He had 104 stolen base last year. He's shown a ton of speed in the spring. Is that someone you're willing to like draft and stash till he comes up? Or you're more like, I'll wait on Fab and try and get the other guy that gets called up with some steals?
Yeah, Chandler Simpson, I think, also had the lowest bat speed of any player during spring training too.
Fair enough.
So again, I'm definitely not drafting him now, right? He's the type of guy that I'm looking for on the waiver wire, but I think the Rays don't have enough hitting as it is, I think, to go to him regularly. I'd be more interested in DeLuca, right? Who looks like he's the starting center fielder, and last year stole, I think, more than 20 steals last year in part-time. So again, like, you don't need to have the guy who steals 80 bases, and doesn't do anything else for you. You can compile some of those 20 to 30 guys that get drafted that are providing a little bit more value. So I'm probably not going there, but we'll see.
Yeah, he's going to get drafted too. It's enough kind of hype in spring. There's a couple of choppers he's at the left side that he beat out there. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's really fast. But the only thing with him is he doesn't strike out at all, which is a nice thing. I think that at least you're going to get on base. He walks a little bit too, but I don't think that happens in the majors. I don't think anybody's walking the guy with the lowest bat speed in the majors. I think he's going to knock that bat out of his hand. If you're going to hit a single, you have to earn it. So I don't think that be hard for me to see that walk rate kind of continuing on. I know he had a really good one in the minors. He was over 10% in 2023. He was like 8.5% in 2024. But I kind of think that that goes away in the majors. But we just had one of the bigger helium guys go. Someone I talked about last week in the podcast is really liking. So I've been not enjoying his price going up. Pete Crow Armstrong goes to Eric Albright in the middle of the 7th round. So that's about pick 97. He is rocketing up. He was someone you get kind of 11th, 12th round, even like 3-4 weeks ago. Really good spring. Clearly he's going to play. He's 22. He has a great glove. Going to keep him in the lineup no matter what. Where do you fall Pete Crow Armstrong with this super helium right now?
Yeah, I don't mind it. Like you said, I think the glove is really good. I think the second half of last year, he was really good. He's going to steal a lot of bases. I have him right around there on my sheet, as a fine value at pick 97. It was a lot nicer earlier on in the draft season when you could get him around 130, 140,
Yep.
150. So it's always sad to see those types of things happening, but he's got pop. Like you said, he's got a great defense. I think the only question mark is kind of where is he going to hit in the lineup. The one note of caution, I think, is for a lot of guys, they liked him beforehand and they're drafting him now, but he is doing really well this spring. I think you can't put a lot of stock into hitters during the spring. I put stock, like I see Robbie Ray going up, and I can totally see that because one of the research that's been done, it actually demonstrates that the number of strikeouts, the K- walk rate are somewhat indicative of potential breakouts. And with a guy like Ray, seeing that he's he looks healthy, he's throwing strikes, he's been here before. I can see that. I just hope that people aren't moving Pete Crow Armstrong up that much because of what he's doing in the spring. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think a lot of guys liked him early on, but that's the one note of caution that I'd put there.
Yeah, I think for hitters, like I don't really care about the stats. The thing that does matter is like if you're competing for a job, then the spring matters for an offensive player. But yeah, in terms of like what stats he's going to produce later on, aside from the at bats and playing time, you don't want to like factor in too much of that. But Robbie Ray's an interesting one. 9 1/3 inning in spring, 17 strikeouts, 0 walks. So that's a 50% K rate, a 0% walk rate. Obviously, we're talking about 9 innings. It's absurd. He's only thrown 34 innings the last 2 years. How do you feel about this? So how many innings can Robbie Ray get? We threw 189 in 2022. We talked about 34 in the majors in the last 2 years, 3 1/3 in 2023, obviously injured, 30 2/3 with the Giants last year. What do you kind of think we're getting to? Do we get like 130 innings from Ray, 140? I mean, he's 33 years old. The Giants have no real reason to kind of hold him back. They did sign him for 5 years. They have him through 2026. What do you kind of think? What do you think we see from Ray in terms of an innings pitch projection this year?
Yeah, there was on the latest Launch Angle podcast, Rob Silver, our friend, did a really nice analysis where he was looking at looking at Ray and his previous production and looking at, okay, if he did this over 130 innings, exactly where would he rank on the player rater, right? And it was like a 3.7 ERA, it was a 1.2 WHIP, it was more than a K per inning, and it was still pick 120, right?
Yep.
So he's got to go above that if he's going to return value. And I think that's the challenge with a lot of these helium guys is factoring those pieces in. They did a nice analysis too of Clay Holmes and what is Clay Holmes going to get to, right? He's shooting up drafts, and are we assuming that he's going to get to 160? Are we assuming that he's going to get to 180 like a typical starting pitcher, whereas we don't really have a history of folks doing that? So I think that's the concern for me with Ray, and probably why I'm not going to get him there is there is, it does, and just because he's pitched well doesn't mean that he's not going to get injured again, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that all of these different factors that you have to think about in the performance of a pitcher, are going to happen. And so that's, I think, the reason why I won't be taking him where he is right now, even though like I do really, really like him as a player.
Yeah, before we jump a little more, just a quick note from our sponsors at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes that easy as well. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize as needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule, whatever you dream up for your fantasy league, Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more. And it's all for free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. So Toby, we're through 8 rounds here. So that's 120 picks. Still 3 teams without a closer. Teams 7, 9, 11 have still not dipped their toes in there. Team 6 finally took one. The old veteran Kenley Jansen there. We're seeing a lot of yellow these last 4 rounds. The teams that started hitting early have grabbed a lot of pitchers. The teams that grabbed some pitchers early, everybody's kind of getting their base and their balance. I wanted to ask you about catcher. How do you normally draft catchers in a 15-teamer? Are you like one really good one and then tank? Are you 2 good ones? Are you a good one and a medium one? Do you have kind of a general strategy with catcher?
I love catchers. I love drafting catches early. But I think you have to be flexible there. I think there's some really nice catchers later on too. This year, I think there's actually a decent amount of depth, even with the injuries, as long as you're willing to take them, right? I'm definitely not a wait it to the back end of the draft to grab two guys maybe with upside. So I think there's a lot of diversity too, like when it comes to the catcher position. You have some power only bats, like in the middle ranges, your Cal Raleighs, your Bangaliers. You also have some batting average guys, spread throughout the draft a little bit. So, your Yainer Diaz's, your Gabriel Moreno's, you got JTR, who's, fallen considerably from last year, given the injuries and the lack of speed last year. So I think there's a lot of really interesting guys, even with the injuries that have happened. And there's also some really interesting rookies, right, that are garnering some headlines. So I think the catcher position it has some depth this year. I think it's really interesting. It can meet a lot of needs of your teams. Generally, I do like to take a catcher early, though.
Who are those? Who are a couple catchers you like a little bit later that you think you can, if you do get stuck and you're in the middle rounds, you need one? Are there a couple names that you like in the middle there?
Yeah, I mean, Gabriel Moreno is a guy I think that that I like a lot. Where he's going in drafts, I could see him taking a leap. He's still really young, so I like Moreno a lot. Just going to bring up my catcher list over here. Kyber Ruiz is a guy I liked a lot last year and didn't really perform. But again, he's still really young. He makes a lot of contact, puts a ball in play. So I like him going right there. Tyler Stevenson obviously just got injured, but another guy who can help you out in batting average. Hunter Goodman, if he gets a roster spot and he plays on a regular basis in Colorado, he's got a ton of power.
Boy, does he have a ton of swing and miss though too.
Oh, he does, absolutely. But as your catcher, right, if he's hitting 220 and he's hitting 20 bombs in Colorado, you don't necessarily mind that as long as you compensate it for it later on in your draft. Danny Jansen is a guy who now is pretty clearly like the number one catcher somewhere, who's going to get a decent amount of plate appearances, and he's also in a better hitting venue than he would have otherwise been with the Rays. So I like him. So there's some guys going later on, I think, that can definitely contribute to your team.
Strategy-wise, is there a world that you take Francisco Alvarez or Sean Murphy and hold a third catcher on the bench, or those kind of just you're moving on, they got hurt, taking someone else?
No, I think the only world where that happens is if I can get them really late. I haven't looked at the ADP to see where they're going, but like if I can get Alvarez, after round 23 or something like that, maybe it's a possibility. Maybe I take a stab at one of the rookie catchers, assuming that they might get a spot. And if they don't get a spot, then I'm just kind of mixing and matching and factoring in, Alvarez for 4/5 of the year or 3/4 of the year, depending on when he's going to come back.
Rookies, you're talking kind of a Drake Baldwin, Augustin Ramirez type guys?
Yeah, exactly. Caro on the White Sox, or I haven't really been following Caro or Teal that closely on the White Sox, but I do think that they could be of interest if it looks like they're going to get plate appearances. And I think the key thing too for some of those guys is I think they're good enough hitters where if they're getting plate appearances, they don't necessarily have to have the bulk of the work. If they're getting halftime playing time, they're contributing a little speed. Some of those guys too, like I know Ramirez has a little bit of speed in him. Yeah. So I think there's just a lot of options. I think it's just a matter of being strategic and thinking about how it fits into your build, right? If you're already struggling in batting average and you're like, I'm going to go after Hunter Goodman for my second catcher, right? Probably wouldn't do that.
A couple of names here. We got 4 first basemen that have gone in the last 6 picks here, and we're in the 9th round right now. And the Mike the Mouth Ultimate Draft. Again, there's a $5,000 entry, $40,000 first place. A lot of big high level NFBC players that are in this draft. Some guys who have won some big overalls. We got Vinny Pasquantino, Christian Walker, Tristan Cassis, Jake Berger in this round. A couple other corners with Matt Chapman and Royce Lewis. So we got 6 corners out of like 10 picks in the middle of the round there. Where are you on Christian Walker right now? He's he had the oblique issue last year, and then he's got like a little bit of soreness this year. The MRI came back clean, but he's kind of missing games, coming back, missing games. How concerned are you with Walker? I know he hit in the batting cage on, I think it was Thursday, and they say he's fine, but man, every day this goes on, I worry a little bit, especially because he had something last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's getting older. This is, like you mentioned, this is the second consecutive year where this has happened. I just don't think he distinguishes himself enough from the other first basemen and the other corners. I think there's some guys going real late in drafts right now at corner infield spots that are real bargains. And so for me, I'm really not prioritizing a first baseman in this round. I have Pasquantino as the top one of the first baseman that went in this round by a decent margin. Walker's number 2. Casas after that, and then Berger. So again, I think that first base is just not something where I'm really prioritizing a guy in this area of the draft.
So as we're talking first base, we talked earlier about, guys have got to fall if these pitchers get pushed up, kind of the sexy big names get moved up, as rookies move up. Where are you on Matt Olson right now? Obviously the huge 2023, 2024 fell off pretty significantly with the power. He went pick 58 in this draft. His ADP in the 6 main events right now is 41. So we're talking end of the 3rd round there, range of 36 to 48. This is someone that was a pretty secure, like early 2nd rounder last year, coming off the huge season. Where are you on Matt Olson? Hit 247 last year, only 29.98. Played 162 games, so it wasn't an injury thing. He had 685 plate appearances, but the BABIP was about the same. The strikeouts were about the same. Hard contact was down a little bit, but the power was almost in half last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there was I can't remember which podcast it was, but they did a trivia question, and it was the player who had played, I think, in 162 games for 4 straight seasons, and it was Olson. So there's something to be said for that, like consistency playing there. Again, I'm not really prioritizing a first baseman so early on. I can see the reason for Vlad because the batting average is such it magnifies it so much. But when you look at Olson, it's like, the last 5 years, 195, 271, 240, 283, 247. He's probably somewhere in the middle. That's where the projections have him around 252. With that, he has the 54 home runs from 2023, but that's really the anomaly. Yep. So even if you're giving him 30 bombs, like there's nothing that really differentiates him from the guys that are going around this spot right here. And prioritizing batting average early on, or even speed maybe, or homers, that's not necessarily the guy or the profile that I'm going to look at.
Fair enough. Good points right there. Some interesting names have gone off the board here in the last few minutes. At pick 14 and 9th in the 9th round, Ned Donahue picking team 14 here. Royce Lewis in Minnesota. This is a guy that was insanely good. Like the end of 23 is insane. Like hitting grand slams every other day. It seemed like just a monster finish to the year, but 58 games that year. Last year had a good, got hurt like on the first at bat. He was running third base, got hurt. Came back, hit 16 home runs in 82 games, so essentially half a year, but hit 233. The BABIP was really low, so maybe that bounces back a little bit. But that we got back-to-back years where we're missing more than half the year. Half the year last year, more than half the year the year before. At what point do you take a shot on Royce Lewis? Obviously, the talent is there, but just the gameplay has not been so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really interested in Lewis. Again, the CI position to me has a lot of depth to it. He's not stealing bases. I think that's one product of him getting injured. So you're not going to get the steals. He's got 605 career plate appearances, and it's a great line, right? 268, 33, 81, 104, but it's definitely front loaded in terms of that 2023 season was much better than what we saw in 2024. And so the question comes like, how much of it is it injury? How much is it adjustments that pitchers are making to him, and he hasn't been able to adjust back last year? So there's still a lot of question marks for him right there. So it's not really somebody I'm prioritizing at that point. Like Matt Chapman went to team 3. Obviously, he wasn't available anymore. But when I look at Matt Chapman and I compare him to Royce Lewis, it's Matt Chapman for me all day long. And so for that reason, Lewis really isn't somebody who would be a top priority for me right there.
Man, Chapman just smokes the ball. He just consistently hard contact. This is a good barrel rates. Last year had 15 stolen bases. Where do you think those 15 stolen bases are real at all? You never had more than 4 in a year. It's always weird when a guy has none and then all of a sudden pops that big year. It's hard to project. You project yourself kind of 8 to 10 for the year after and kind of split the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one thing that projections are good at, right? They're looking at aging curves. They're looking at what they've done in the past. They're looking at what they did this past year. So I think he's projected for 10 steals, which is a huge boon. One of the things that I'm always thinking about is you're typically looking to outfield, second base, shortstop, to get your steals. And so that limits, if you don't have any steals from the other areas, that really forces your hand to get steals at those positions. So if you can get steals from your third baseman, from your corner infield, from your catcher, places that you wouldn't typically get them, it gives you a lot more flexibility down the stretch of drafts to be able to pivot and move and to get the best value guy instead of really forcing in those steals later on.
Yeah, it's a good point. What about another young guy here that just went off the board in the 10th round, Jasson Dominguez, the Martian? Looks like he's going to start in the outfield for the Yankees. Obviously, we've got some holes in that lineup at the moment. Giancarlo Stanton is injured, and who knows when he's coming back. Where are you on Jasson Dominguez? Obviously, the talent is sky high. He was really good in the minors last year. 18 home runs, 31 stolen bases in like 102 games in the minor. No, 58 games in the minor. Sorry, he was 11-16 I was adding up to there. But, speed and power in the minors and a little less than half a season. Didn't do much in the majors when he got called up, but it was only 18 games. In 2024, he was hit for a good average in the minors. Also, obviously, a huge plus for the Yankees. Where are you on him in like the 10th round?
Yeah, again, I'm a little bit of a broken record here, but especially with these guys where we don't really have a history of what they're going to be able to do. He's got 100 plate appearances in the majors. He's hitting 207. He does have 6 homers. He does have 6 steals, but again, he also has an injury history. So I do think that there's a lot of question marks. And for me at this point in the draft, this is really still the core of your team, right? These are guys that you're relying on to provide stats. So when I think about, like a Ian Happ, versus a Jasson Dominguez, I would lean to a guy like Happ where I know exactly what I'm getting. It makes it easier to build the team around. He's getting me runs. He's getting me RBI. He's playing. He's getting me some steals. He's getting me some homers. And the batting average is probably going to be better than what we're seeing with Dominguez. Again, the upside with Dominguez could be much higher, but again, we're not exactly sure if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, so we're heading to the end of the 10th round here, so the guys are probably going a little bit of a break here in the NFBC and the live drafts. They do about a 10 to 15-minute break after round 10. These live drafts are pretty intense, especially the Vegas Saturday one where you got 9 million teams drafting at the same time. You hear all the names around, so it's good to take a little bit of a break here. We'll try and get someone on to kind of chat about their team during the break. It'd be fun to kind of see how someone's thinking in the middle of a draft here. What do you take a kind of a look at your team after 10 rounds and be like, where am I? What do I need? How do you kind of during a draft? How do you kind of track where you are balance wise? Are you like adding up your projections, or you have a sheet where you're like, I need killing these positions, these stats? How do you kind of figure out? Because I think people do get a little bit out of balance as they draft, and they can't. It's hard to kind of get back to that in the especially about a live draft. There's a lot going on. Online's a little bit easier. You got your sheets. You can look at news, all that kind of stuff. How do you kind of make sure that you have that balance as you're going along here?
Yeah, Scott, you're asking me if I have a sheet. Of course I have a sheet.
Of course you have a sheet.
Yeah, so what I'm typically doing is before the draft happens, I'll actually go into my sheet and I'll put in some targets there and kind of see if the draft were to go exactly according to plan, right? Kind of where would I be in the course of my lineup, and then as the draft develops and guys are moved or are taken that are part of that sheet, I'll move them in and out. I'll move in guys that are similar that I might be targeting later on. And so that just gives me a sense of the balance that I'm going to have. Right. And so it also gives me an opportunity to see where I'm at balance-wise over the course of the entire draft. So I can see, right now I'm projected at 50% for speed. So I really need to be looking at getting some speed guys later on. So it's really just a good barometer for me as I go through the draft to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on maintaining that balance. Because again, that also keeps your other draft options open so that you can pivot and go after value later on.
Right. I got a couple of questions for you, but we do have someone jumping on here. I think we've got Dan Semsel, who's team 9. I picked him because he is interesting. He's got 5 starters and no closers. Just kind of wanted to see how the build's going here. Let's see if we can get him on here. Hey, we got Dan here? No? Who we got from the room?
We got Dan.
Dan, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. How you doing, Toby?
This was Scott, but Toby's here as well. How's
I'm right here too.
Let's put the glasses on here. So how you guys been?
We are good. How's the draft going for you so far? I want to jump on with you just as everybody here because we're kind of talking builds here and kind of where you're going. You have 5 pitchers so far. No closers. Was that the plan? Are you thinking about punt and saves in a standalone? You don't have to give us your whole strategy, but what's kind of your thought process here with the 5 starters and no closers?
Well, once you get past the first major closers, the way I look at it, it's a crapshoot after that. There's still people out there that I can live with as junk closers if I go that direction. But I wanted to have a core of pitchers that I could hang my hat on with a real good strikeout to innings pitched ratio. That's what I like to target with my pitchers. And I'm very happy with these guys. Good decimals, good win potential, and great strikeouts to haul in.
You started out with 4 hitters. Was your plan to start out heavy offense? Just kind of the way the draft broke out for you?
Yeah, I've noticed that over time that I tend to go heavy pitching early a lot of times, and I wanted to shake it up for this draft. So I went in with the plan to go 4 hitters. In fact, I was even considering possibly going 5. If Doyle had fallen to me, it would have been really tempting to have him, but I've got a lot of shares of him already.
Where do you fall on Tyler Glasnow now? That's your starting pitcher 1. You took him in the 5th round. Obviously the talent is sky high, but the injury has been the concern. Career high innings last year, but still a number that's not a huge number. What are you drafting him with the thought that I want 125 really good innings? Do you think there's a chance to get to 150, 160? Where do you kind of project Glasnow with the innings?
I've got him at about 155 innings this year, and it's something I think he's just due. It's one of those I always worry. Just about with every pitcher these days, I worry. Yeah. But you look at it nowadays, pitchers don't throw 200 innings anymore. And so why not get some guys who are going to give me really good decimals? And like I said, high strikeout to innings pitched ratio during the innings they give me.
Beautiful. What's your plan here for the next couple of rounds coming out of the break?
Well, obviously I need to fill in my middle infield quite a bit. So those are going to be some target areas. And I'm just going to be watching at some point. I would have taken Suarez if he had made it back to me in 10, but now I'm just going to kind of hang out and look for a couple of scrap closers and watch what other people do. I've got a rotation I can live with, and I like my core offense, particularly in the power side of the house.
I think avoiding Suarez is going to end up being a gift for you. I think that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Not on my draft list this year.
Not on your fan. He's when you get down to this point. This is where I look at the Suarez, the Romano, the Scott. There's a few others that I throw into this category that I see as round 9 through 12 closer material.
And Tanner Scott went round 5 in this draft, though, so that wasn't happening here. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a reach.
Yeah, that one felt pretty early. We talked about that one pretty in depth. Toby, any observations or questions for Dan on his build?
Yeah, Dan, good to hear from you. Looking forward to seeing you in Vegas in this next weekend. I noticed that you got 3 outfielders, and you mentioned 2 that you were going to go Brenton Doyle if he fell to you there in the 5th round. Is it intentional to kind of prioritize outfield earlier, or are you just kind of looking for value at the beginning of the draft?
That was more value at that point. It's one of those things that I like Tucker a lot. Picked him up in an auction as well. And I really thought I was going to end up with Tucker, Soto, or possibly Carroll at the 9th spot. So not displeased. And I really liked Duran in that too. So my plan going in was Tucker and Duran, and nailed it.
It's nice when a plan comes together.
Yeah. Now the fun part about that was wanted that power in the 3rd spot. So Alonso or Olsen, whoever got to me, I've got them in that order, and I was going to snag one of them. If they had both been gone, Seager would have been on the pile.
All right. Very nice. Well, Dan, we appreciate you jumping on. We'll let you get back to the draft. I know you're in the break there. You want to kind of figure out your next strategy, but we appreciate you jumping on. It's some really good insight on your build there.
No sweat. You guys have a good one now, Scott. I really hope everything's going well for you out there. I know it's been a rough winter.
It has been a rough winter, but we are all doing well. I really appreciate you saying that. I don't know anybody doesn't know Dan. He's one of the good guys in this industry, so I much appreciate you saying that.
Cool. Take care.
Right, take care. You too.
Bye now.
So Toby, we got through 10 rounds. They're taking a quick break there. Any other? We got Dan's team down. What do you think about 5 starters in the first 10 rounds? Obviously, his starting pitching build is really, really strong there. Obviously you never know with injuries and stuff. Got Glasnow, Fried, Sonny Gray, some guys in Kodai Senga, some guys who did not throw a lot of innings last year in Glasnow, and Glasnow was pretty decent, but Senga obviously missed most of the year. Do you like 5 stars for 10 rounds? Do you think that's a little bit of overkill? Where do you fall on that?
I'm generally 5 pitchers through 10 rounds.
Okay.
So in this example, like Dan clearly was not a fan of the closers that were remaining, and he wants to maybe have that be the point where he leaves the draft, and he's a little bit weak there. But
and there's a lot to be said for like if you're in a draft where something is going way earlier than you want it to like pivot a little bit and take what the draft gives you a little bit. There's some spots where I'm like, you know what, this closer run is insane. I don't want any part of this, and I'll figure it out later. It's a little bit dangerous and it can get sketchy, but there are some drafts where you get some runs like that, and I'm okay leaning the other way. You just have to be able to. You better make sure in rounds 11 to 15, maybe some guys you do want to target there because you want to adjust a little bit. You just got to make sure. At all times, if you miss speed early, you're going with the drafts going. You make sure you always have pockets of guys to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what he said about Glasnow too. Like Glasnow, there seems to be a little bit even more value for him given that pitchers aren't throwing as often. I know last year he only went 134 innings, but people were drafting him at the 2-3 turn last year.
Yeah.
And they were happy with those 134 innings, right? He gave you good ratios, really good whip. Good Ks, 168 strikeouts in those 134 innings, got you some wins. And then it's not like you just get a 0 for the rest of the season, right?
Right.
You're putting in other pitchers. You're trying to get value there. So I like that guy. I like the way at least the first 3 of his rotation he built out. You have 2 guys who, are known for kind of having lower ratios. In Freed, definitely, maybe Sonny Gray pitched really well last year. You have a really solid core there. I like those 3 for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see how he kind of figures out this next set of picks here. At what point in the draft do you kind of start to figure like I need to worry about positions and stats rather than just the best overall player? I think early on, you mentioned where you're targeting, batting average, what you make that's important to you, but obviously you're trying to get the best players these first couple rounds. At what point in the draft do you like, all right, I'm weak here or I need this position? Like, how do you kind of shift from best player available, getting the most talent to building kind of based on what you've drafted already?
Yeah, I've tried to get better. I used to be really rigid in terms of like thinking about, I got to fill in this position. I got to fill in these positions. I got to do this. But I've really shifted more towards that value-based approach. I think one of the critical things to do is to think about the draft from the back forward. I know we hear that a lot in analysis. But really know, like, who are those guys at different positions that you're comfortable with having, like, even if it is your second baseman or your shortstop. But as an example, like in my OC online championship, which is a 12-team league, my second baseman leaving the draft were Christian Campbell and Tyro Estrada. Now, I didn't feel great about that, but, like, my idea was, hey, I feel okay about going with Christian Campbell right here and taking a risk on him making it up to the team or not, because the projection is really strong. And if he gets 600 plate appearances, I'm going to do really well. On a 12 team, the replacement value is a little bit higher than the 15 teamers. So I wasn't as worried about being able to find a suitable replacement at second base, but I was comfortable even waiting on a prime position in order to do that. And that's maybe a little bit of an extreme case, but as long as you feel good about, where your threshold is for having a first baseman, right? Or having a second baseman, do you feel okay having Carlos Santana as your corner infielder, right? Things like that. Then I think that really can help guide you in terms of what you're comfortable with in terms of prioritizing value versus prioritizing different positions.
Especially in a 15-teamer, because you're going to have weaknesses in a 15-teamer. You're not going to leave the table with like your exact 90 percentile target unless you have some insane draft or you're drafting with a bunch of people that don't draft well. Like you're going to have holes in that format. You're just going to have it. The 15-teamer is so deep, you're going to have holes in that. You mentioned the online championship earlier. Are you more willing to take? I'm just going to use Tyler Glasnow as an example because we're talking about. You're more likely to take a high upside, but obviously risky guy in a 12-team where the replacement value is a lot higher. You can usually find someone that's workable on a 12-team waiver wire. Whereas 15-teamers, there's 90 more players taken or whatever it is. Is that right? Yeah, 90 more players taken. The 30 rounds, 3 more teams, so 90 extra players taken. That's a big chunk of the waiver wire out. You've got 90 extra guys in the waiver wire on a 12-teamer. Are you more willing to kind of take a little bit of a risk? You mentioned you're a pretty a safe drafter. You avoid kind of super risky guys. Are you more willing to do it at 12-teamer?
Yeah, absolutely. Glasnow is actually on my OC.
Oh, there you go.
So definitely feel comfortable going there.
I did not know that before I led that question. That's a good question asking right there.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, as usual, your questions are on point today and very relevant.
I feel like Team One might be trolling me a little bit. Simon Hampton in Team One has taken 3 of the guys that were on my fades list from the episode last week. So I think that either Simon thinks I'm really bad at this, maybe didn't listen to the podcast, or just has obviously has his own opinions. But Freddie Freeman, I don't love at the price. Bryce Terang and Stephen Quaney took back to back. Just funny that the same team has 3 of my guys.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's an example like. Number one, I wouldn't intentionally target your fade, Scott. You have a very good career record, and I feel like that
I'm better at fades than targets. Weirdly,
yeah, there you go. But like you mentioned, I think it's also a question of so you have a Bryce Terang and a Stephen Kwan. How is the power throughout the rest of the team, right? Is that already a priority, or are you already feeling really good about that, given where they're going to be there? Terang for me is kind of like one of those clear examples of a guy who hit his 90th, 95th percentile outcome last year. And so are you expecting regression? Again, it may not come for sure, but just something to be cognizant of. And just looking at his team, like his batting average is already like a strength, right? He's got Bobby Witt, he's got Freddie Freeman, even Rutschman for a catcher is positive on the batting average. Will Smith positive on the batting average. Then you got Terang, you got Kwan. So at what point is it kind of a little bit like, all right, how are you doing in the other categories?
Right.
How are you doing with your power? How are you doing with your runs, your RBI, your steals?
Yeah, I feel like Stephen Kwan is a guy that I had him on a fade overall, but there are some team fits obviously where he does make a lot of sense. I mean, if you have a bunch of speed and power early, but your batting average is a little suspect early on, he can fit really well. I took Luis Arraez, who I don't usually take. I took him in a main event last year. Just kind of he worked perfectly. Like I had a lot of speed, I had a lot of home runs. My batting average is maybe a little bit below average. And he just kind of fits some teams well, where you don't get in many home runs or steals, but he kind of works there. But someone had a question in the chat for you. It said, Toby, you've mentioned waiting on corner infield and second base late. Are you securing outfield early, or simply get the stats and kind of figure out the rest as you go along?
Yeah, second base, actually, I knew that I was going to go after Christian Campbell in the OC. To your point, Scott, about like really prioritizing later in drafts, getting in 12-teamers, getting those higher upside guys.
Yeah, a couple of high upside shots in the last like 5-6 rounds of a 12-teamer really makes a lot of sense to me.
For sure. I actually don't like second base all that much. I know everybody talks about the depth at second base, but I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. So second base, getting that later on is definitely not a priority. But yeah, CI, I'm willing to wait. I do have been prioritizing getting outfield earlier on, but again, I think you can't really like lock yourself into a strategy before you go into a draft. I used to do that. I used to be like super meticulous and very rigid, and you just really like you can't do that. So if I have guys evenly matched, then I'm going to go with the outfielder first, just because there's so many platoons later on. But it is kind of like a back and forth. But that would definitely be my I would prefer to do that if the draft was flowing in the way that I wanted it to do.
Yeah, before we jumped on the air, we were chatting. I blamed you for the fact that I'm in the middle of a DC right now in the 35th round. But I have learned that, man, outfield dries up fast later in a draft. Like as you get to like round 18, 19, 20, you mentioned a lot of platoon guys, a lot of guys with batting average issues. Outfield's not a deep spot this year as you get in those deep. Like finding your 5th, 6th outfield if you need them late, it's slim pickings. I find myself in like the 20th round, like really struggling to find someone I really want to take.
Yeah, it's true. It's those platoons. They're brutal. So you have guys like Garrett Mitchell, who, I loved having on my team at the end of last year, but is pretty clearly like going to be in a platoon, just knowing the way that the Brewers operate and what he was able to do against lefties last year. And so it just enters your mind. It's like, do I want to have to navigate with the guy I'm picking right here? That whole like, well, I've got 2 righties out of 3 games on the weekend. Do I go with him, or do I go with the 3 of 3? Or, just navigating that thing is not something that I really love to do, especially in like a DC where like you just really want to hammer the plate appearances at that point in the draft.
Yeah, and I think that that makes sense. Like your 7th outfielder, like, oh, this is great. If he's got 4 righties this week, he kind of works really well, but I don't need to use him. When it's your 4th, 5th, and 6th outfielder, it's just a little bit tough because the guys you want to like not have to think about taking out every other weekend. And it's just I really like to get my 5th outfielder, someone I can play, because guys are going to get hurt too. And if you got 3 platoon guys there, it's hard to get them matched up really well.
Absolutely. And then how does that impact your bench too, right?
Yep.
So it's like now you've got 3 outfielders on your bench that you're
Yep.
mixing and matching, and then you don't have the ability to hold a lot of starting pitchers. And then you got other places where if there's an injury, you're not going to be able to fill in. So exactly, I feel like there's just this kind of cascade of things that happen when you take that approach.
And they're guys you don't really want to drop because you took them at a decent price, but you can't use them every week. It's tough. And you mentioned bench build is important. Like if you've got 5 guys, you got 3 outfitters, then you got a couple of guys that are hurt, suddenly you're throwing a 9th pitcher. You don't want to throw that week because you don't have anybody else to throw. And you always want a couple of, you want to be able to sit a couple of pitchers. You're like, I don't love this matchup. This guy's a middle reliever, but I'm holding him. He might get the job. Like you just don't want to have to throw guys. And I find people that, like, I got my 9 pitchers. You want to be able to sit a couple of those guys each week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question in the chat, are the lows, I guess they'd be the lows/Lau on Tampa Bay, starters or platooners? Brandon Lau, if you look at roster resource, hits 2nd against righties for the Rays. Josh Lowe hits 4th against righties for the Rays. Do you think that these guys get platoon? The Rays are not quite as deep offense-wise as they have been in the past where they can platoon everybody. You got Curtis Mead kind of on the bench. Maybe he could play for Brandon Lau. He's been pretty good in the spring. You got Caballero who can kind of move around the position there. Richie Palacios also. When you're taking the Rays, a team that does traditionally tend to platoon a lot, where do you fall on Josh Lowe and Brandon Lau? Obviously talent against righties, have some pop. Lowe can steal some bases, but where do you fall on these guys kind of playing time-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things to think about. I think it was, I want to say it was either James Anderson or RotoWire podcast or Pulled Hitter podcast, but they were talking about Jason Collette had mentioned that the Rays used to platoon a lot too because the turf was so challenging on fielders on their body playing on that turf in Tampa. And so now that they're playing on grass on a regular basis, that he doesn't anticipate that there's going to be as much platooning happening. And when you look at roster resource and you look at the Rays roster, and there's also been a discussion of just how the Rays field is going to mirror Yankee Stadium. And so having that left-handed power in the lineup is going to be really important. You look at roster resource and there really isn't platoonable guys, right? You have Curtis Mead, so maybe he subs in for Brandon Lau at 2nd. Maybe he's alternating with some of the outfielders there, but it's Richie Palacios. You mentioned Caballero, but there's not a full set of platoon players there for them. So I think you can bump up the plate appearances a little bit, and that makes them a lot more interesting, given the power that Lau has. And then Lowe just being a guy who, 2020, as long as he's healthy for sure. So then you also have to factor in the fact that Lowe, I haven't looked at Brandon Lau, but I know that Josh Lowe has really struggled against lefties. So it's like, do I actually want him in my lineup at this point in time? So.
And he's got a 32% strikeout rate that went up last year over, I think, 7% last year. So there's an issue there with it. He just had a ton of swing and miss last year.
Yeah, I do think that it's one of the things that's interesting is sometimes you'll see that happen. So with Lowe, I think I was looking at this earlier in the year. I may seem like a fool after I go through this, but he had a 31.8% K rate in 2024, 24.8 in 2023. But if you look at his contact rate, it was actually higher in 2024 than 2023. So it seems like there's some sort of anomaly that's going on there. It was also higher than it was in 2022 when he had that 33. So
is that him taking strike threes looking sort of thing, or what kind of builds into that usually?
Let's see the CSW here. That'll give us an indication if I can find it. I'm not finding it. I don't know why it's not showing up there. Well, typically, there's the CSW. So CSW was nearly identical, 27.8 to 27.3. So it wasn't more called strikes either. I think that's one of the things that can happen in a smaller sample size. So for him, last year was 387 plate appearances. It doesn't seem like a lot, but sometimes with those smaller sample sizes, when you're not getting a full season, it can just be the luck of the draw, right? Like where there's these anomalies that happen between your contact rate, and over the course of a full season, you'll regress to the mean, but you just never have an opportunity to do that. So that's another reason why Lowe is maybe a little bit more interesting is the projections have him at about 29% K rate, which again is way too high, but is certainly a huge difference. So 4% more balls in play, that'll work for him.
Since we're talking Rays in the new ballpark dimension, they're playing AAA stadium AAA stadium for the Yankees. It's gonna be interesting rainouts, by the way. There's gonna be a lot of freaking rainouts and rain delays in those games. It's gonna be tough. But the Rays have 3 pitchers in this draft that have gone within the last I'm gonna call it the last 10 picks. Ryan Pepio, Shane Baz to the same team 13, Mike Masato, our host for this event, and then Taj Bradley went to Scott Fleming, who was on the air earlier in Team 7. Do you think the Rays go 6-man, or do you like one of these guys more than the other? Where do you come in the Rays pitching? You obviously got Shane McClanahan. He went in the 7th round to the 11th team. Mike DeCalvacante. I always keep messing up that name. But Pepio, Bradley, and Baz kind of always go in this clump together. I've seen them. One goes off the board, the other 2 do. Where are you on the Rays pitchers? Do you like one of these guys more than the others? After McClanahan, what's kind of your preference between this group of Rays? Guys, they're all interesting names.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the good news is that the Rays do not have a history of injuries. So the likelihood that they're going to move forward with that 6-man rotation and that nobody's going to get injured is very low. They have really low velo guys. No, I mean, I think for me, I like Taj Bradley probably. I
do too.
Not those guys that are right there. He's shown glimpses of being able to be a really elite pitcher. And I think sometimes in this range, you have to be like, there's this, it's like there's these safe guys, right? Like the guys that I consider quote unquote safer are like the Eovaldi's of the world, right? Where they have low whips and things like that. But with Taj, like you could really see him jumping into the, top 20 starting pitchers, right? Like he's shown glimpses of being able to do that on a consistent basis. The projections really like him a lot. And I think that's one good thing too, is like, the projections will factor in the ballpark changes and things like that. At least the BatX will and the Bat will. So that will really help you identify those guys. But my rank see Bradley is a pretty clear value overall, whereas the other guys are going about where they should. So I like Bradley a lot. But again, I think there's things to see in all of them. Like with Pepio, earlier on in the year, he was really good. He kind of waned a little bit towards the end, but it was his first time throwing a full set of innings. So I think with each one, it's really just a matter of what your preference is and what you're looking for. Taj was also a blow-up guy, right? Where he had these just like his fastball got absolutely demolished.
Yep.
I think he brought in either a cutter or he started throwing his sinker more at the back end of the year and really saw that K- walk rate increase. So we'll see. You got to love having Rays pitchers because you know that they're going to do everything they can to maximize the value.
Man, Taj had a 3 1/3 9 earned run game and a 2 1/3 8 earned run game last year.
Yeah.
It just murders you right there. Like those are weekenders. So they always happen on a Monday too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, right? Is when you're drafting is trying to stay away from guys who will do that. And that's like my internal struggle around Taj is I really like him a lot. The projections like him a lot. You can see what he did towards the back end of the year to kind of mitigate some of those concerns maybe that you were hoping to see, but there's still that blow up opportunity that can really ruin the good ERA that your other starters are providing for you.
Although, to be said, he had a 4.11 ERA still with those 2 starts in there. So he was pretty darn good the rest of the way. Good question. And the kind of the next question I had here, we had a question in the chat, how do we elevate Rays bats, but we're not elevating, Rays pitchers ERA? Where do you kind of fall with both? It's weird. We got 2025, we got 2 teams playing in minor league stadiums this year. We got the Rays playing in Tampa. We have the A's playing in Sacramento. As you're drafting, how are you kind of morphing any kind of rankings for those 2 parks? I think with the Rays, yes, I do think that like the pitchers will be hurt a little bit, but I think you're seeing in the draft that reflected in the draft cost. I think Bradley. Did you ask about the Orioles too? Sorry, Orioles. That's right. The Orioles are moving in the fence in left field too. So we got that, and we have 2 teams in the minors. So we have the A's and the Rays in the minor league ballparks. And you're right. The Orioles are moving in Baltimore to a little bit closer in left field.
Yeah. So with the A's, I think a lot of people thought that they were going to be that Sacramento was going to play as a big time hitters park, but I don't think the park factors really bore that out. And so I think that's, again, another good thing about the projections is the good ones will factor those types of things into the situation. But I don't think at any point in time Sacramento has played as like this elite park. I do think that the one thing that I had mentioned on a previous podcast was for pitchers, Oakland was a really poor strikeout park because it had so much foul territory. So guys like JP Sears or other ones, you may see a little bit of a bump in the K rate for them. So that to me was a bigger thing.
That's interesting because I think people usually think like, oh, a lot of foul territory, good for pitchers. It gives probably good for pitchers ratios, but bad for Ks because you're right. And at bat ends of the pop-up, you can't strike anybody out. Now, granted, they can get a home run after that too, but you can also get a strikeout. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it in that direction.
Yeah, and then Sacramento, I think, again, those things that would have been pop-outs in the infield will now benefit the batting average of the hitters. So I do think you'll factor that in, but I think projections factor that in. And so I think it's important because they'll do that on like a comprehensive basis and not just like selecting the hitters that you think are going to do better or the pitchers. And then with the Orioles, I definitely think that has an impact on guys like Ryan Mountcastle, right? Where how many times did you see him hit it to that area of the field? And then with Orioles pitchers, I think it impacts them a lot more. In my perspective, just because their pitchers aren't good enough, right? Like I think about a Zach Eflin, who before they announced that, I was really into him, but seeing how he's pitched in the spring, seeing all the contact that he's given up, he's really dropped for me as a guy who I'm trying to prioritize. He still won't walk guys, but how many more homers are we going to see as a result of that, of the Walls moving in, especially playing in the AL East and playing against some of these loaded Lightums. So definitely has a factor.
It seems they kind of went. I think the quote was from the Orioles GM was kind of happy medium in with the Baltimore. It was so close before when Camden first opened, then they moved it way back. It seems like they're kind of going in the middle. So I think that, but that was one of those wall changes. Like I think we always kind of tosses away. Like I'm sure we'll be fine. That wall in Baltimore made a massive difference.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it went from being like the best homer park to being not even a homer park. And so I think it is going to have a big influence. And I also think when you think about like who the power hitters for the Orioles are, there's a lot of right-handed guys in there. You think about Westberg, you think about Mountcastle.
Yep.
I definitely think although Gunner's obviously a lefty. We'll see. I do think that one will have a big impact.
There is no discount on closers in this draft. Chris Martin from Texas just went in the 14th round. That's someone who I like late, but man, that's not late anymore. That's pick 197. There is no discount on closers. We talked to Dan Semsel earlier. He did take a closer. He said he was going middle relief and closer. He is a man of his word. He went Anthony Volpe in the 11th, Justin Martinez in the 12th. Arizona Diamondbacks fireballer. Obviously, the upside's pretty big with Martinez. We don't know, if it's gonna be his job. AJ Puck, maybe they changed about. Puck was really good last year. People look at his ERA and WHIP and like, not that good. He was horrible as a starter in April, and then unbelievably good the last like 5 months of the season. But Martinez is interesting. Martinez has a huge strikeout rate. He was like 30% last year. He pitched 73 innings last year too, so he was very involved for the Diamondbacks. Got a lot of innings. The walk rate's up. It's almost 12%, but his ERA was 2.48 last year, 1.31 WHIP. Obviously, the WHIP elevated because of the walks. How do you feel about Martinez? He's a big swing and miss guy, 14.2% swing strike rate. One of those guys that, if he took the job and got like the first 4 or 5 saves could really take off, but someone that you're taking not knowing if he ends up being the guy.
Yeah, I think it's really tough.
It is.
I have him in 1 DC, I think, and it's just challenging. They've got so many arms there, I do think that if I had to bet on a guy right now, it'd probably be Martinez. He was the closer at the end of last year.
Yeah.
And while there was a little bit of a mix and match that they did, I think you have to remember that they were in such a playoff battle towards the end. I think they were really treating it like a playoff series at the end where they were mixing and matching based on lefties and righties. So bringing in Puck, maybe to face the highest leverage guys. So really mixing and matching in that sense. Martinez never really lost the closing role. He pitched really well as the closer. So him, Puck. I also think Ginkel, is another guy who was good. And so I think it's tough. I wouldn't jump him up in this instance, right? But this is one of the reasons I'm really trying to, I used to do a lot of speculating in these rounds. And I've tried not to do that because there are some really good players going at this point in the draft. Guys that are a core part. I'm just looking at like the guys who are going right now. Eugenio Suarez, think about his second half if he can maintain something like that. Think about Josh Jung, right, who looks like he's fully healthy for the first time. And last year, if he wasn't injured, was going to be going much, much higher. Look at Isaac Paredes, right? Like the pull hitter, in the pull park. Like,
did he go to like the just greatest possible place for his down the line pull hitter? The Crawford boxes are built for Isaac Paredes.
Absolutely, like Matt Shaw, like a guy who could have a high batting average and homers and steals. So that's why I don't mind, like you did in the DC, taking those 2 clear-cut closers.
Yeah,
because I actually feel like this is the area of the draft where you win. Right?
I've said that forever. I think rounds 12 to 20 is where you win drafts.
Exactly. And I don't want to be taking 50-50 shots here.
Yeah.
I want to be taking, like, look at Goldie. My sheet has Goldie worth about as much as Christian Walker, right?
Wow.
So those are the picks.
Yep.
That can do it for you. You know,
I fully agree. I've always 12 to 20 is always, when you look at the teams that win, there's always like 2 or 3 really good hits in here. And there's always like 2 or 3 just really solid plays too. Like it's it's not always guys that are going to be the first round value, but it's guys that are like a 5th, 6th round value. Those are guys that win leagues right there. Couple of guys I want to ask you about in this range. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, look at Cedric Mullins. Cedric Mullins had 18 homers and 32 steals last year.
Somewhere, Justin Mason is pumping his fist for that one.
Yeah, for sure.
That is his dude right there, and he came through pretty well last year. A couple guys I want to ask you about that did go in the last round here. Someone that's getting a lot of hype in the spring is Austin Wells, Yankees catcher. There's a chance he might lead off, and suddenly you're like, leading off in front of Jazz and Judge, like that'll work pretty nicely. But Wells is someone that had some moments last year. Hit 13 home runs in his first full stint in the majors. I know I played like 19 games in 2023, but 115 games last year. Only hit 229. The strikeout rate's not horrible. It's 21%, which is kind of decent for this era. Hard hit rate was about 39%, so he didn't hit decent balls hard, especially for a catcher. Walks a lot, so there's got a good eye there. Where are you falling in the Austin Wells helium right now? We've got Tyler Stevenson's hurt, Francisco Alvarez is hurt, Sean Murphy's hurt. That's helping push guys up like Austin Wells. Where are you on Wells? He went in the 13th round here. I kind of feel like that maybe is lower than to go in the main event.
Yeah, I can definitely see it with Wells. I actually have him at he's 180th on my sheet. The thing about Wells is, so there's a couple things. The K rate is low, but the reason why he has such a low batting average and a low BABIP is because he has a really high infield fly ball rate.
Okay.
And infield fly ball rate is actually proven to be one of the stickier metrics year to year. Like when
that's essentially a strikeout too, anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Your batting average is 0.005 or something like that on those. So they are essentially outs. And so that's why I think you might be seeing like the lower batting average. And if you look at the projections, they're seeing that too. Highest projected batting average is Steamer at 232. But like you mentioned, you got to factor in. So like if he has a good OBP, right, which he does. I mean, he doesn't have a good OBP because his batting average is so low, but he does walk a decent amount. And if he is at the top of that lineup, then you are looking at the potential for a lot of runs, which again is not necessarily something that you anticipate getting from the catcher position. So can definitely see it there. On my sheet, I updated it yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. I think it was his ADP is 173. I have him as 180, so he's right around going where you want him to go. But again, he's kind of a build dependent because he is going to have that low batting average, I think, and he's not obviously going to get you much speed. So just some things to consider when you're thinking about him.
Yeah, he's at 168 so far through 6 main events, so a little bit up from that, but still not. I thought it'd be a little more helium based with the injuries to the other guys, but he's still kind of stuck in that range. The guy who went before him in the 13th round to a Team 10 owned by David Einhorn is Victor Robles, who is someone that speaking of fades list, he was one of my popular fades a few years ago when he was going really early. I just didn't see it with he hits nothing hard, but now we're at a point where he's taken a lot later. Had a resurgence in Seattle last year when he got to the Mariners, hit 307. The BABIP was hugely high. It was 370, but he's fast, so maybe he can do that a little bit. Still doesn't hit the ball hard at all, 28.5%, but the barrel rate was the highest of his career at 6.2%. Had 34 steals, the big number in 91 games. Are you buying in on the Victor Robles renaissance here in the 13th round? Do you think he's about the right spot? If you need steals, is he someone you can take a shot on at this point?
Yes, I think so. It's a little build dependent. I've got, I think, maybe 1 or 2 shares of him out of 7 DCs because like you said, I mean, he was stealing a lot. He's actually always had like decent. Well, maybe I'm lying. Maybe I'm lying about his barrel rate being decent, but
his barrel rate's not yet. Yeah, max EV was always. I think he had some always. Like, barrel rate has never been over 6% before last year.
Yeah. So it was the max EV that I was thinking about, where it wasn't elite, but it was at least much higher than from a guy that you would anticipate. I think the key is like he's on the Mariners. He's really good defensively. They are going to roll him out there. He's right-handed bat, so he shouldn't platoon. They let him steal whenever he wanted to last year.
Yep.
So I think there's that upside, but again, like there's also the downside of he becomes the player that he's always been.
Yeah.
And
like he could be out of the league by June 1st. Yeah. Like that's possible. Mariners lineup is kind of sneaky bad.
Who the Mariners lineup?
Yeah.
Oh, it's god awful. Yeah. It's horrendous. I don't even think there's anything sneaky about it. I think it's just horrible. It's like very matchup worthy.
I feel like we don't we think bad last. We think of Marlins and White Sox. I don't know, but like thereafter they got Julio, Cal Raleigh, or Rosarena. But then Luke Raley was pretty good last year. But then Haniger's always hurt. J.P. Crawford is like the ultimate jag, just a guy. Jorge Polanco, Ryan Bliss. Like then on the bench you got Mitch Garver if when he DHs. But man, it's a tough lineup.
Yeah, the bad news is Mitch Garver sucks. So you got a lot of crap in the lineup, and you got even crappier on the bench.
It's really too bad because their starting pitcher is really good.
I mean, Justin Turner came out and said that, like where he's like, this is a generational pitching staff. This is like Braves early 90s, and they refuse to spend any money on hitting. It is unconscionable, honestly. It's like, I feel bad. I lived in Seattle for 9 years. M's fans are so passionate. Like when there's a good team on the field, they show up, and they just don't have an owner that spends, and it's really, really sad.
And 3 of those starting pitchers are under 28. Like these are young studs too. Like it's tough.
I mean, Brian Wu, I think he went way up here too. Like he looks incredible. Like there's just so many guys, and they just don't invest. It's really sad.
It is really sad. It's too bad because those guys are going to throw some gems and not get wins. It'll be frustrating with some of those. But I want to ask you, speaking of young stud pitchers, we just had Jackson Jobe come off the board. End of the 14th round to Team 1. Simon Hamp took him. What do you do with someone like this? Like there's talks of him getting, piggybacked with Kenta Maeda. There's talks of him maybe winning the job. He threw 91 innings in the minors last year, and they were electric. 2.36 ERA, 26% strikeout rate. Too many walks at 12%. And he came up. He only threw 4 innings, and they threw him in the playoffs. Like he got some interesting playoff innings there too. Like they were pretty committed to him, kind of making a difference for them. It didn't work out really well. He had a rough inning there, couldn't get out of it. But where are you on Jackson Jobe? End of the 14th round is like pick whatever that is, pick 210 somewhere in there. Is this someone you're willing to take a shot on here? Obviously the upside is huge, but I just don't know. We don't know role. We don't know how it's going to work the first, full time through the majors. What do you do with guys like this who obviously have a bright future, but we're drafting for this year?
Absolutely not. I am not drafting Jackson Jobe anywhere near where he's going at ADP. I mean, so he's pitching this spring, right? And Baseball Reference has this really good metric, which is essentially equivalency for spring training. Like, what is the level of the player that you're going up against? Jobe is actually pretty high at 8.4. That's like pretty high, but that's still like in between AA and AAA.
Right.
And so again, and he only has struck out 8 in 12 and a third innings.
Yeah.
Right. So like, this is like, he's not even striking guys out in spring training. So he may be throwing harder. He may look really good, but if you're not going to strike out major league hitters, you're not going to be an effective pitcher mostly. And so there's all these questions, and I can't remember where he was going in drafts, but it was way too high, and I definitely would not take him. I would honestly take Kenta Maeda straight up over Jackson Jobe at this point, given what Maeda's been able to do this spring. 19 strikeouts, most in all of spring training, 1 walk. The history that he has, like in being successful at a major league level, right, when he's healthy. And he was healthy at the back end of last year. So, I'm staying away from Jobe, at least where the ADP where he's going.
An hour and 53 minutes in. I'm really glad I asked that question because that was a fantastic answer on Joe. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah.
No, that's good. The strong opinions is what makes this fun. That's really good. I love when I hit one exactly like that.
Yeah.
So speaking of guys who used to be good and last year were horrible,
is this a David Bednar question?
It's a David Bednar question. Pick round 15. He went to Team 6, who was Dominic Rello and Rob DiPietro. They do. They took a closer at one point. We got a big sticker on the screen right now, so I can't see their pick. But they took Kelly Jansen earlier. So they have Jansen and Bednar. Like if we're a couple years ago, we're looking good. But what do you do with Bednar? This is like probably one of the hardest guys for me to figure out. He was. I'm just going to call him elite the 3 years, the 2021, 2022, 2023. ERAs in the 2s, whips in the 1.1 range, a little bit better in 2021, but huge swinging strike numbers. He was over 15% all 3 of those years. He was over 28% strikeout rate in all 3 of those years, over 32% in 2 of those years. Like the dude was a legit all-star closer. Granted, he was on Pittsburgh, so maybe the save numbers weren't as high as we wanted. He did 39 one of those years, but last year, he threw 58 innings. So it wasn't, I know he was hurt a lot, but he was also pitched a lot for a reliever. 58 innings is a pretty good number. Strikeout rate way down, walk rate way up, swinging strike rate way down, home run rate tripled, almost quadrupled from the year before. ERA was 5.77, whip was 1.42. What the heck do you do with someone that was so good and then had, for so long and then had 1 year where they're so bad?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. Heading into this year, I was actually kind of more interested in Bednar than I am right now, just given the struggles with finding the zone in spring training. Because I saw that towards the end of last year, his velo actually went up. And so that it gave me encouragement in terms of him being healthy. So he was definitely a target earlier on in the year. The one thing I'll say is, even though he has not pitched that well, he does have a 14% swinging strike rate in this spring. Again, it is against mostly minor league opponents, but there's at least a little bit of something there. I have to assume that they're probably going to at least give him a shot. Number one, they want him to increase in value. I think he's coming up to the end of his deal, and so they're going to want to move him, and if at all possible. So I do think that they'll give him a shot, because then they can also say, like, look, we gave you a shot. You had the role. You appeared to be healthy, and you blew it. And there's not all that many like other options. I mean, there is Dennis Santana certainly that they could go to, but like Colin Holderman, I know, who has typically been like the 8th inning guy for them as well. Like he's not a big strikeout guy, although he has been pitching, I think, decently this spring. So I do think that they'll probably give it to him. So I don't mind him here just because he does have the history of being the closer, of being elite when he has pitched, and he does at least appear to be healthy. For all those reasons, I don't mind it. It's not necessarily something that I'm loving doing right here, but I can definitely see the reason for it.
A couple rounds earlier, we had someone who I kind of put in a similar bucket with Alexis Diaz. He was really good in 2022 and 2023, closing for the Reds. 1.84.096 in 2022, his first year in the majors. Then 3.07, 1.19 in 2023, but had 37 saves, a 30% strikeout rate. He was really good too. Obviously, the walks are always an issue with Diaz, but 2024 was kind of a mess. Only 28 saves. The strikeout rate went down 8%, 7.5%, something like that. Swing strikeout was down almost 4%. Home run rate doubled. ERA went up to 3.99. WHIP went into 1.3. It's kind of similar question with Bednar. As someone who was really good before, I think we had some doubts about him going in last year. Just the walk rate always scares me. I hate closers who walk guys because you turn on the TV and they walk the first guy and I just want to walk out of the room really quick. So I hate closers who walk a lot of guys, but kind of comes with the territory sometimes when you guys have such good stuff. It does happen. Diaz went in round 12 to Team 2, John Limberis. Do you like Bednar more than Diaz? You like Diaz more? Do you want neither one? Or where do you fall with Alexis Diaz?
I'd rather have Bednar than Diaz. Diaz for me is like when's the other shoe going to drop guy. Like for 2 years, we've just been waiting. Like the whip is bad. The walks are bad. Everything's bad. And there's no reason why, like he's in a bad ballpark. Like there's no reason why he shouldn't be getting absolutely destroyed. I don't think he's a good pitcher. And so for that reason, like I would go with Bednar, because Bednar, at least when he has been healthy, has been elite. And so I'd much rather rely on that than I would with Diaz, where I'm really like drafting him knowing he's not a good pitcher and just hoping that he accumulates saves for me. And I'm never super comfortable doing something like that.
And when a guy's striking out a ton of guys, you can kind of stomach the walks a little bit. When he's not, man, those walks just really, really come back to haunt. But We're in round 16, so I'm going to go the back half of the draft technically. So we're we're drafting 30 rounds here. You and I are going to stick around for a few more rounds. We won't bore everybody with the last 5 or 6 rounds of the draft, but as we get to the late rounds, I'm just going to call it the back half of the draft. Do you have a certain position or stat or something you feel more comfortable finding in rounds like 15 to 23? Like I find myself liking some starters in here, liking a few hitters. But do you find anybody like positions that you're like, you know what, I can just wait on that because I love the later guys this year? It sounds like corner infield was your answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, not really corner infield, but I think a lot of the guys that I like have gone at this point in the draft. I mean, it sounds lame, but like pitching.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
There are a lot of like later pitchers that I do really like a lot, even guys going in, the reserve rounds 23 through 30. I think spring training is also, especially for pitchers, is really interesting, right? Because you get this data like velo increases, you can see the swinging strike rate of guys, you can hear about like pitch mix changes or whatever they've made. And we've seen every single year, there's 2, 3, 4 guys who really make a huge jump because of something changes in their arsenal, whether it's a velo bump or a new pitch or, they just get a little bit luckier. So I definitely think pitching at this point in the draft is something that I'm a little bit more.
Do you have anybody you've seen so far in spring this year that has done that you're willing to share with us?
Oh God, I've got like a whole list, Scott.
I don't want you to share a whole list. Give us one that you find interesting, kind of based on changes in the spring.
Well, like let's say, I've literally got this whole list. Maybe I should just like rattle it off the whole list because there's some sort of security and just naming like a bunch of different people.
Fair enough. If you don't want to read the list at all, that's fair too.
No, that's okay. Our viewers, our listeners, they deserve.
I agree.
An honest assessment. Some random guys who maybe I haven't heard as much about. Joe Boyle. He went over to the Rays. He's throwing absolute gas. There's obviously a lot of control related issues, but we've seen what they did with like a Glass now before, where it was kind of like, hey, throw command out the window, man. Just throw the ball over the plate.
Yep.
You have the stuff that's good enough, and that includes a velo bump for him. So he was a guy who was mentioned. I mean, Christopher Sanchez is not in this area again, but I would just like to add my voice to the chorus of voices saying how good Christopher Sanchez is, and I'm not willing to draft him at where he's going now.
He was 8th round in this draft to pick Team 4 Sam Horton. So yeah, there's the helium's real with Sanchez, and there's no hiding that one for sure.
For sure. Gavin Williams went round 10 in this? My God.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking for Michael Soroka. Obviously has had a velo bump and has looked really good. Ryan Weathers is another one where he's throwing really hard. Casey Mize, has looked really good.
Yep.
And that's the thing that I would think about if I were thinking about Jackson Jobe again, not to like hammer home. I'm going to look really bad when Jobe is the rookie of the year this year. But it's like Casey Mize, right? Was Jackson Jobe 4 or 5 years ago, right? And now he's got a velo bump. He's looked really good. He's got, I think, the second highest K- walk rate. So I'd be going him over Jobe actually in drafts at this point in time.
Casey Mize was the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. Landon Raup of the Giants.
Yeah.
He has, I think, the 4th or 5th highest K rate and a very low walk rate this year so far in spring training. So again, like there's a guy. Obviously, Will Warren is somebody. He's probably already gone here, or has he gone yet?
No, I don't think so.
He hasn't gone, so he looks like he might get some run. Even old friend Carlos Carrasco, has a little bit of a velo bump, and he's been pitching well. May get some looks. Tristan McKenzie.
Back to Landon Raup for 1 second. He's going to start the year in the minors, though, right?
Probably, I would guess so. Let me see.
Because you got Logan Webb, Verlander, Robbie Ray for sure, and then probably Jordan Hicks and probably Kyle Harrison.
Yeah, I mean, Hicks is awful, right?
Hicks is awful.
Harrison has been so-so. I think Raup will maybe he'll be the long reliever. I mean, I know he was with the big club last year. The Giants in general look actually really good. Like Keaton Wynn, I think, has looked pretty good. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you may have to wait for him, but we're talking like very late in the draft, like taking a stab on somebody.
Raup is 14 Ks, 1 walk. Wow, that's a good name right there.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome.
We're probably we're
only the best for the listeners.
We're probably saying it wrong, but he's been good anyway.
I mean, honestly, every single freaking Tigers pitcher looks unbelievable. Like Kiter Montero has also looked really, really good. I mentioned Tristan McKenzie. He's up 2.5 miles per hour on his fastball. Like, I mean, again, like he's also been terrible, but that's something that you can at least like kind of start to be like, well, like that's very interesting. So he's been pushing up a little bit, I think, because of that too.
Since you mentioned the Tigers, are you back in at all on Spencer Torkelson? Has this spring sold you at all that he could come back to the second half of 2023?
Absolutely not.
I love the absolutely not answers.
As somebody who drafted him last year on my main event, that was like the worst offensive team I had ever constructed. It was like Torkelson, Morel, like just like it was just Brian Hayes, like
Oh God, Brian Hayes. Oh, wow.
Brian Hayes, who's already injured this spring.
Someone just went.
Poor guy.
It's back issues at his age. I mean, that's rough. Trust me, I know that gets no better.
Yeah, and he said they were chronic. He was like, "This isn't going away." He was like, "This is who I am," and it's sad,
I took him late in my DC. So you're saying that's not going to win me the CLQ right there?
I did too.
I almost, it's almost like there's a little bat signal. I mentioned Spencer Torkelson and Paul Spohr showed up in the chat. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing right there. Paul mentioned that Torque is smashing the ball spring. He is smashing the ball spring, which is why I brought him up.
Okay, ready?
And why I asked about him.
I'm going to look up Spencer Torkelson and let's see the level of pitching that he's faced so far this spring.
While you're doing that and while you're chewing, Richard Sands with a nice comment about you. Someone said, someone should hire Toby as a paid baseball analyst. He's a wow. Couldn't agree more. Toby used to have his own podcast, and it was fantastic. I think he went personal choice by not doing his own podcast anymore. That is correct, right?
Yeah.
He did not like people didn't watch.
I'm sorry that I'm eating.
No. It's not like people didn't want you on the air. It's just
a professional.
Busy.
A professional person does not eat while they're talking. Remembers to eat lunch before they go online.
At 2 hours and 5 minutes in, you're allowed to have a snack. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. Spencer Torkelson was a 7.5. So I think that's in between high A and double A is the quality of the pitching that he was facing. So again, pitching is hitting stats are virtually irrelevant to me. In spring training, the only thing I look at is guys who change launch angle or like ground ball fly ball rate. That's really the only thing that's been proven to be sticky. Or like you mentioned, where they're competing for a position. But again, those guys, it's not a skill question. Yeah. It's a playing time question.
Yeah, it's you won the job. The other guy's getting sent to the minors, so you're going to play every day kind of question. Then it does become really important. Someone just brought the board that I do like. Tyler Soderstrom. We talked about the athletics, moving, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. But Soderstrom is someone that came up last year, looked pretty good, then got hurt, and it's one of those things that's like we didn't know we were going to get there. But 49% hard hit rate last year with the A's, 14.5% barrel rate. Like those are. As you take those, I know you cannot take those over a full season, but he's 2 or 13 plate appearances, so not like he played 30 at bats. You take those and you put him over like the season, and he's like really, really legit good last year. But 25% strikeout rate, so high, but not in the not in the 30s range, which is good to see the first time through. I think he's going to get a full run at the job. There's an outside chance he gets catcher eligibility, which I don't think is going to happen, but he's caught a couple games in the spring. If he were to get to 10, that'd be freaking huge, of course. But I think he can get Langoliers, but it probably wouldn't happen for a while as a problem. Like if it happened, he plays twice a month. That's not going to happen until July or something. But I like Soderstrom as a late corner. He went in the 17th round here to Mike Masato. I think the power is really legit real here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good shot. There's a few corner infielders going around this spot. There's him. There's Jonathan Aranda from the Rays. I
love Jonathan Aranda. He's one of my favorite late plays too.
Yeah, totally. And the thing about Soderstrom, like when I look at his rolling average graph, his contact rate also surged towards the end of last year. And so again, like one of the things he struggles with his batting average, but if he continues to make more contact, that'll only help his batting average. He also has a relatively high ground ball rate too. It's around 50%. And So there's more power there if he can get a little bit more lift. And like you said, he's got opportunity there. And he's in a better ballpark, like we talked about before. So yeah, I think he checks a lot of boxes. I think he's a great kind of guy. And like you mentioned, you can easily see 600 plate appearances and 25 bombs easy from him.
Yeah. So if you're in my league in the main event on Saturday, the draft orders coming out tomorrow. Don't take Tyler Strom in the 16th round because I am planning on doing so. So that means I got to do it in the 15th round then, right?
Yeah.
Is that how that works? Speaking of the 17th round, we got Team 7, Scott Fleming, who we mentioned won this thing 3 times. He took Jackson Holliday at 17.7. Are we at a absolutely not on Jackson Holliday for this year? Or where are we with that Holliday? He obviously was the number 1 prospect in baseball, came up last year, was a disaster in the majors, hit 189, 33% strikeout rate after not striking out much at all in the minors. Like, he did not adjust well, looked overmatched. The eye test did not work either, but 45% hard hit rate when he did hit the ball. So he made some good contact. Obviously was a monster in the minors, 12 and 24, hit 323 in 2023. Last year, 271, 10 bombs, 8 steals in 73 games in AAA. Do you think that he just has the job? Do you think they play him every day? Do you think he's at risk of going back down? Where are you in the 16, 17 round if you need a middle? Are you willing to take a shot on someone who obviously has massive upside and huge pedigree?
Yeah, I don't think I would grab him. Scott's an incredible drafter, incredible record. Like you mentioned, he had won 3 years in a row, I think, before last year. So, but from my perspective, like, I'm not a big Holiday fan. I wasn't into him last year either. I just feel like there's questions about both the power and the speed to me and the batting average now. And that's a real challenge. He's going to be hitting towards the back end of that lineup. We know that for sure. Yep. So that's going to limit a lot of the things. And honestly, like, I think there are some really good players that are going to struggle for playing time for the Orioles. Ramon Urias, I know that, like, not a fancy name, but he was smashing. He was absolutely smashing the second half of last year. 9% barrel rate, I think, for the full year. Really good player. May slide in against lefties for third base. Or second base, and mixing and matching with Westberg. So again, like, I think there's too many question marks for me to grab him here. But then again, the thing about prospects is their development isn't always linear, right? Yep. And so they can sometimes make those big jumps. So maybe Scott's analysis is here's the place that I want to take a guy that can really be a home run with high risk. And that makes sense right here in the draft. For me, there's just still guys going around here. Like, I see Brendan Donovan going. I think Willie Castro to Team 6 right there is maybe like the pick of the draft for me so far. Wow. A guy who's, well, just because he's like, I'm really bad. Like, what is the 16th round? I always have to like multiply, 10 times 15 is 150. And then 6 times 50 is 90. So around 240 or whatever it is. But like, Castro has all this position eligibility, and he's the leadoff hitter. He's a switch hitter. So, he's going to step in there. So it's just things like that where I'm like, like, Castro for me is very clearly ahead of Holiday. So I would go there. Brendan Donovan is very clearly ahead of Holiday for me. So I would go there. High batting average guy very late in the draft, who I know is really popular. Even Morel is like a guy who's got a ton of upside. Yeah, I would probably go there. Glaber, I would probably go. Glaber, again, like, he feels free. Right? Like, he's like, I've got my beard, like my full-on beard, which I have huge respect for. Like, oh my God, like the beard. And he just looks freer, right? Like, being out of the limelight. So you could see where he could be effective. Detroit actually plays as a decent home run park for righties, as long as you're not hitting the ball to center. So again, there's a lot of guys that I would probably prefer. We talked about Soderstrom. We talked about George Springer going right there. Like, like Norby.
Yeah, I like Norby too.
Yeah, there's a lot of good guys right here. Honestly, like, the last 3 rounds have just been straight fire in terms of who guys are getting.
Glaber just might be fired at the ball. The wall's moving in Baltimore. He might see his career coming back with that.
Oh yeah, for sure. He just needs like 2 series in Baltimore this year.
That dude made a lot of money at Old Camden.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Joe Adell was 20 home runs and 15 stolen bases last year, kind of quietly. I think a lot of people gave up on Joe Adell. He did hit 207, but we're talking a guy who was 37% strikeout rate in 2022, 28% last year, Hard hit rate at 44%, barrel rate almost 12%. Some really good numbers. His BABIP was 244 last year. Like, that's pretty low. If he just kind of pops that bug up and keeps the strikeout gains, I know it's a couple of ifs. Round 18, Joe Adell to Simon Hamp. I really like Joe Adell at the spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I have it on this sheet right here. I'm going to do it though. And I'll tell you, when I plug in Adell's projection at 600 plate appearances, it really, so the playing time is the major question, right? And again, you don't want to take too many chances with that, but I have him, my regular projection has him at 453 plate appearances. If I give him 600 plate appearances at his current projection, guess what rank he is overall?
93.
You're supposed to guess above so that.
I'm sorry.
Really, 115.
That's still.
Right?
You said it so well. I thought it was gonna be really high, but 115 is still. We're at pick. What do we pick? 260, 280 right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you're getting this huge value potential, and so the question is just whether he plays or not. And then you have to ask yourself, though, it's like, why would they not play him? Like, what do they have to lose? The Angels, right? I mean, they obviously have guys that they can plug in there. They had the strangest off season where they're like, oh, let's get a DH only guy on a team that has Mike Trout, and let's like do all these other strange things. But again, like he's right now they have Ross Resource has him playing full time in center field again. So that this seems like a pick for me where I'm like, I have a very difficult time in a DC picking Joe Adell. But when I get to the fab drafts, Joe Adell becomes a lot more interesting.
Paul Sporer, our friend, had a question in the chat. Sell me on Connor Norby. I think he sucks. His K rate was crazy high last year. My sell job on Norby is, I know the Marlins lineup sucks, but hitting second, they are going to play every single day. And for me, this late in the draft, it's kind of a toss out 2024. Like, he was terrible last year in the minors and the majors. But, you look at 2023, 21-10, only a 21.5% strikeout rate, hit 290. I just think he was a mess last year. And in this late in the draft, like, maybe he's still a mess. Fine, he's gone. But you still got some speed and power here. You've got a history of good batting average in the minors, both in 2022, 2023, AAA in 2024 with the Orioles AAA team there. So you've got a really good history there. It's just the strikeout rate was bad last year. And I don't know if he just got lost. Maybe pitchers figured something out. I get last year was bad. I think there's enough earlier in his minor league career for me to take a shot on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're being mean to him, Scott. Honestly, You said he was awful last year in the majors. Last year in the majors, he hit 194. He hit 194. Felt like that. He hit 236 in 194 plate appearances, 9 homers and 3 steals. Now, if I just add in 6 plate appearances and I make that 200 plate appearances, I just multiply that plate appearances. I extrapolate to 600 plate appearances. That's 27 homers and 9 steals from your corner infielder, right? So you're getting speed and you're getting power from your corner infield, and the batting average is not that awful. He should play every day. He was hitting at the top end of the lineup. His contact isn't great, but it's not awful at 69%, right? It's not like 65%. 14.8% barrel rate. He's projected for a 27% K rate, but the projections range in his batting average from 254 to 238. So again, even if he hits 238 with 20 bombs and 10 steals, which is what his projection is, I love that, getting him here in the draft as my CI.
Every time I look, I see the 14% barrel rate last year, and I'm like, he struck out a lot, but man, there's a lot of hard cut. If he could just drop that in like the 26, 27% range, I think there's some upside considering he goes at pick whatever this is, 270 or 260.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot there, and we know that Miami lets guys steal bases. So I think there's upside there as well.
David Petrozzelli had a question in the chat. Are we going to put the board up after? I'm sure that Mike Masato will make sure to post this board. He'll probably try and put the names on there. I just think that we just couldn't do it tech wise to put the names on right now. It's just the way the software is built for the sharing the draft. We weren't trying to hide anything. We've obviously mentioned all the names here, but I'm sure Mike will put it up here pretty quick. One of the last questions before we jump out of here. What do you do with like prospect stashes? We're at the time of the draft where someone's taking Team 12, Jody Ryan, who I've known for many, many years playing the CDM DC games, been in Vegas many times. Took Christian Campbell. I know he's a Red Sox homer, but we're talking the time where you're like, 19th round. If I take a prospect and I got to cut him, it's kind of okay. But early enough where you don't really want to cut him. It's not like the 27th round. Where do you get to the point where you're willing to take a minor league stash, an injury stash? We just saw Grayson Rodriguez go off the board in round 18. Obviously, a lot of talent there, but, we don't know when he's going to pitch. Pitchers take a long time to ramp back up. So probably a while till we see him pitching. Are you at the time here at the draft where you take a stash? Are you willing to take one or two stashes? Do you want no stashes? What's your strategy with like a minor league or an injury guy that is not going to be, not going to play for, let's just call it 6 weeks as a number?
Yeah, no stashes for me on minor league guys, at least.
Okay.
One thing just on the Norby thing. So Norby, in my projection, I have 20 homers and 10 steals with his batting average. And that's 190th. Okay. And so you just think about where he's going in the draft right now. He doesn't need to absolutely excel like 2010 from that spot in the lineup in your corner infield.
What the other sneaky thing on Norby is he could get some multi-position eligibility at some point too. I don't know if they move him around a little bit, but he's third base eligible now, but he might play some second base. That would help that eligibility. I don't think he will, because I think probably Otto Lopez starts there, but that could move around a little bit. Maybe we get some multi. If you get corner, middle, multi guys, those are always gold too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is for me, so my idea of a stash, so the guys that I stashed on my OC, I stashed Zach Neto, right? Okay. I got him around pick 210, something like that. I mean, that for me is a stash, right? Where I'm like, I know he's coming back relatively early during the season. He has already been incredibly successful as a major league hitter.
Yep.
And so when I think about minor league guys, it's like, I'm picking them up. Number one, are they going to be good, right? Think about what Jackson Holliday did last year, where he was being picked at like pick 150 or whatever it was, because he was the number one prospect in baseball. Think about what he do, right? Our brains remember the guys that thrive, they forget all the guys who are just absolutely terrible. So there's a couple filters. There's like, when are they being brought up? Are they going to play every day? Are they actually going to be good?
The third one's the key for me. Hitting the first time up is hard for most guys.
Where are they going to hit in the lineup? And if they struggle initially, are they going to be set down, right?
Yep.
That's like 5 different filters I got to go through to figure out whether it's worth it or not.
And you have only one of those filters on Neto.
Yeah, exactly. It's just when is he coming back?
Yeah.
When is he coming back, right?
Once he's back, he's not leaving the lineup. He probably will be good. There's no chance he's getting benched. There's no chance he's getting sent down. So you're right. It's one filter versus 5. That's a really good point.
And Neto I had for 580 plate appearances, and player 110 getting him at 210, right? Yep. So it's just like he's still projected for 2020 with less than 600 plate appearances. And this is the guy that's going to hit leadoff on that team, right? Like when he's in there. So again, like for the rookies, you will never see a rookie that's projected high enough with fewer plate appearances to be worth it for me. And I'll miss some guys, but I feel like over the long term, I'll have a lot more benefit from not going after those rookie guys that have so many boxes that they need to check in order to return value.
I called our friend Jody Ryan a Boston homer. He took Roman Anthony the next pick, so he's got both of them. Took Tanner Houck 2 picks before that, and Connor Wong 2 before that. So he's fully leaning into his Boston dumb right there. But that's pretty funny. I was gonna say we're kind of almost done. They're hitting the second break here. Is kind of when we were gonna go to. Any last thoughts on your mind? My question for you on the minor league thing is that change for you at all with pitchers versus hitters? Like, obviously everybody's gonna use the Paul Skeens example from last year, but he's obviously a unicorn. Did it change for you at all with pitchers, or you figure that pitchers coming up first time through, like similar things, like are they gonna stay? Are they gonna be good? Are they gonna be bad? There's so many pitchers that come up and get shelled too. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's way too many filters they need to go through to get through to that. Like in a DC, I'll draft guys, right? I'll draft Logan Henderson, from the Brewers. Like at round 42 or something like that. But I just think each of these picks is so valuable. The only exception with that might be a situation where a rookie guy has been impressive and is in the running for a rotation spot, right. And we don't know whether they got that rotation spot or not yet. That would be like the situation where I would look to go to a pitcher. But I think there's even more filters. I mean, think about the guys who have been the next great thing who have come up and just been absolute crap. Like think about Casey Mize, right? When he came up, and I also think that there's a lot of lesser known pitchers that are more intriguing to me and actually project out better
who will come up in the middle of the season. And so, yeah.
And I assume that changes for you. We're talking about stats. We're talking about guys who aren't going to make the team. Like that changes for you. Someone like Matt Shaw already going to overseas, starting for the Cubs. Like Jackson Merrill last year, went overseas. It was clear he was going to play. Like I think the difference is, guys who are playing from day one, they're committing to is a little bit different than someone who's going to, play and go to the minors. And we don't know if that's going to be 4 or 5 weeks. They're going to go, there's a Super 2, all that kind of time, managing the time a little bit, or they can come back in July. We never fully know with a lot of those guys.
Yeah, totally.
Because I like Matt Shaw a lot, so I don't want you to have a problem with that one.
I love Matt Shaw. Can we talk about Matt Shaw for a couple hours?
Let's talk about Matt Shaw for a couple hours. I don't think anybody wants us to go 4 hours, but no, Matt Shaw 21-31 last year by hitting 284, 18% strikeout rate. He was really good in the minors last year. He's an intriguing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about him is that he provides theoretically 5 category production. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the things that really makes a difference for him. And he's another guy where if you project him for 200 or 600 plate appearances, where he really stands out, I believe. So Matt Shaw right now, I have him as player 268, but that is, let me give him 600 plate appearances.
While you're doing that, I just need to say I want Matt Shaw to go 0 for 8 in the 2 games overseas.
Oh, for sure. He'll definitely get past the mystery drafter when he shows up. You got to be careful. He might be a second rounder if the mystery drafter guy.
Still the best draft ever when he took all the Mariners and A's, like 8 of the first 10 picks. It was beautiful.
I know. It's absolutely wild. Oh God, I hate it when I can't find these guys on my spreadsheet. It's the absolute worst. Well, I just remember that he jumped up to like 120, 130. I gave him 600 plate appearances. And again, like for the Cubs, like they want him to be successful. So if they're going to bring him up, they're essentially indicating that they see this guy as a critical part of their team, at least at the beginning. And that at least gives him the run where if he's successful, that he is going to get a full run out, because they're not going to play him to platoon him when that's not going to be the best thing for his development.
The leash with rookies and like closers, it just matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we asked the chat about Zach Neto. You brought him up earlier. I think that's who you were talking about, the 2020 leading off. Paul Spore was asking that. But Neto, I mean, I think that the question is, he's not throwing yet. You mentioned 580 plate appearances. Maybe we don't get there, but if we get 540, that's still probably going to be okay. I mean, I think we're talking about missing the first 3 to 4 weeks, maybe something like that.
Yeah, he is. The Star Platinum in the chat just mentioned this. He actually has been throwing now. He's been throwing to second base, not all the way to first base.
I can throw from short to second.
You want to know something, Scott? I'm going to take that. All right, because I got him in my DCCLQ and my OCCLQ. So
oh wow! All right,
I'm ready for Zach Neto to come back. Yeah, I mean the thing with Neto is where he was going. Whether it's 580, whether it's 500, he was going to be a supreme value there. And it's also like if I know that he's going to come back in that quickly in a fab draft, then I can draft knowing it, right? I can draft a Nick Gonzalez at the end if Nick Gonzalez is even supposed to play this year. I haven't even.
Or you can even take someone in the 23rd round that you're like, I'm just going to use him. This might be backup. Whereas if he gets hurt in the first week, you're picking up a fab guy that's just brutal. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
When's your main event CLQ? You mentioned the other two. When is your main event that Sunday?
Sunday. Sunday. Yeah.
Are you doing just the one main event?
Yeah, just the one main event. I only do one main event these days. I really love auctions a lot, so I try to focus on auctions. And I've cut myself down to 4 fab leagues this year.
I've cut myself down to 4 too. I'm actually doing 3 this year. My year just got, obviously we talked about it earlier, just got a little sideways. My prep is going to be pretty bad. I'm going to Vegas to have fun this year. I don't think it's going to be a tough competitive year, but I'm hoping that I can draft okay and then play really well in season is my goal.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that just means that you're going to win it all because that's how things work, right?
That would be beautiful. That would work right there. So no,
for sure.
I feel a lot better about it than I did 2 weeks ago. I was considering not playing or not going, but I figured that my thought was in like July, if I'm not playing, I'll be pretty mad at myself for not playing because I'm going to be, things can be relatively back to the way they were a little bit for us. And it's just if I'm not playing in May and June, I think I'd be pretty bummed out. So I'm gonna I'm going to suck it up, have some fun, enjoy seeing you guys in Vegas. It's kind of the best part of that trip anyway. Let's be real. Like the draft's really fun, but hanging out with all the people there is a blast. If anybody's never been to the Vegas live main event and does NFBC or drafts main event, I can't recommend that anymore. It's really fun. We got Ryan Bloomfield coming this year. I've done podcasts. I've never met him. He's coming to Vegas here. I'm really looking forward to seeing him out there. Hey, Bubba, his podcast partner's coming, who I've talked to a bunch, done podcasts with, but never met in person either. So it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be fun to get out there for a couple days.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm really glad you're coming. You deserve some joy,
I do.
To really be
be
excited about, and it'll be really great to connect with everybody. And what you should probably do is what Team One did, and just like ignore your own advice. Draft off your fades list.
Yep,
Scott, and you are going to crush it.
Yeah. Team One really drafted off my fade list and then took Jackson Jobe just to spite you. So it's perfect
for sure. And Michael Garcia was on your fade list, right? Was he on that list or
no? No, it wasn't mine.
No, it wasn't yours. Okay.
But then he took Joe Adele later, so I guess he's making it up for me later. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we're through 20 drafts. Somebody's asking, are we going to be able to view the entire board? Mike Masato will definitely post this board, and I'll retweet that when we get up there. So anybody that needs to see the whole board will definitely post that. But Toby, more than anything, I want to thank you for coming along. I know this is a really long podcast. We did 2.5 hours, but it felt like it flew by pretty well. It's really fun talking baseball with you. You're one of the few people out there that can ask any question to and just kind of fire questions at you. You come up with great answers consistently the whole way through. So we really appreciate you jumping on. Appreciate you sharing obviously a lot of your proprietary spreadsheet info. I know that you're drafting yourself, so everything appreciates you being totally upfront with that. So it's great to chat with you. Great to see you, and it'd be really fun to see you next week too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. This is a highlight of my year for sure, being able to do this draft. Thank you to Mike Masato for inviting us to do this. It's just really fun. It's a great group of players. Appreciation to them too. I mean, it's not easy to have like your draft dissected
for sure
while you go through it. And so just recognizing too that like they have a plan, they're great drafters, and just because we disagree with them on something doesn't necessarily mean that we're right. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing it and taking the time. And best of luck to you, to the family, and everything.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Everybody's doing well. We're hanging in pretty well, doing well. So it's we're on the good side of this whole thing. It's been a rough couple months, but we're doing much better now.
That's great.
Cool. So thanks everybody for listening. I want to thank Fantrax for their sponsorship of the podcast. We always do appreciate that. Last week to really draft. We're in Vegas next week. So we got about a week and a half of drafts left. You want to play in the NFBC? They've got the online championship firing. They've still got some main events going on. I think DCs are probably done. Mine's in like round 38, and it feels like it's going to take another 6 or 8 months. But again, Toby, I blame you for that being in that DC, but it's your fault. But no, CLQ is obviously an awesome contest. Can people join that, or DC's done? Do you know?
Absolutely. People can still join it. You just have to complete your 3 drafts. So as long as I think the 27th is the last day of drafts for the NFBC. So you just got to do it before then. We're up to 150 contestants. Let me just see, including Scott and myself. Let's see if we have any, no new ones in the last 2 hours, but last year we were at 201. So I'm hoping that we can get up to 200 again. It'd be great to have some growth. But I think once people see on the 21st, it'll be 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have the first Champions League auction where 15 of 201 people competed against each other. They're going to be live at an auction. First place is $30,000, $50,000 pot. Should be a blast. Hope you join. Feel free to reach out if folks have questions, but would love to see people in there with Scott and myself.
Yeah, it's really fun. Toby's actually made the top 15, so he's in that auction. As someone who didn't make it, I can still promise you that it's really fun. It was like it made September really fun. Like checking that was a blast, and figuring out where I fell and everything. I think I fell out of the top 15. I think like 2.5 weeks left or something like that. Like I said, my DC team kind of died, but it's a great concept. It's really fun. It's fun when you got a team in 6th place and something that team really matters the last month. Like it's great. I had a main event team that really wasn't in competition, but because of that, it was like really fun to grind it out. It's a really great concept, great format, great players in it, and obviously that Vegas auction is going to be a lot of fun.
For sure, yeah, it was wild. The last fab of the season, I was like looking at my teams, and I had one main that literally had like I think it was the 2nd or 3rd worst offense overall of any offense in the CLQ main event. But I was looking at runs. I was like, I can get up 2 points in runs, and I could get up this, and like. It adds a whole new dimension that keeps it fun and keeps people engaged throughout.
It's a great concept, great format. Props to you for pumping that up and getting that done. I hope you guys get up to 200 again. It's definitely a worthwhile contest. Great. So cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We really do appreciate it. If you want to rate or review us, we would appreciate that. You catch us on the audio version. Obviously, we appreciate that as well. We will post the whole board as well. I scroll up a little bit here so you can see the top 10 rounds. Last few minutes I had it up top there, so everybody's looking there. You can see the first 15 rounds in there too. So I want to thank Toby for jumping on. Always fun. We'll see you in Vegas next week. We're back with Jeff Erickson next Sunday talking our main event drafts. We're both drafting in Las Vegas on Saturday, so it should be a lot of fun to break those down. Hope you have a really good rest of your weekend, and take care.